Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Smudcast number 686. We are defending Griffith again, and why he did nothing wrong. This time we're having the author of the video on. It's always nice to have people on and talk to us about their video as opposed to us trying to figure it out. So thank you very much for Sichlitt. Is it Sich or Sichlitt? How do I pronounce your name?
Sichlitt.
Sichlitt. Okay, it sounds like a candy of some kind.
All right.
That's okay. All right, so we covered this, was at least a month ago, with a bunch of people who were, I guess, fans. I mean, Mark, you're a fan of Berserk.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, I've read and watched some of it, but it's so big, it's so long, and you'd have to stay up to date with all the references and the lore to make sure you're, like, there's all the characters you can't remember. So I'm a semi-anime manga fan of Berserk, but because my fantasy manga is limited to the past 12 years, I'm probably not very well versed in 90s and 80s of a fantasy, except for maybe Lodoss War. So, yeah, it's nice to have.
That was a while ago.
Well, yeah, we're talking 80s and 90s, right? So that's pretty much when Berserk was popping up. And we got the anime in the 90s, so that's when it became more popular. And people began to pay attention. Wow, this is a great story, and this is great characters. This is fun to watch and fun to read. And then there's this gigantic manga to check out. So that's what people are impressed by. I think everyone misses Miura and his work and the people who are keeping it going. Which
his dialogue is dearly missed. Like, it's just not the same anymore. It's just like a early draft now with almost final draft art, I would say.
What's the release date on, or the release schedule on these mangas now that he's gone? Is it once a month? Is it every 2 months?
Well, every odd month maybe.
Oh, okay.
Right now we're waiting for like an end of July release.
So it's like those gemstones you're just anticipating every few. Oh, when's it going to come out? Yeah. Well, we all have those wonderful gems. So this, I believe, is Sichlitt's gem. This is one of your favorite, if not your favorite, anime manga, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly a fan of the Golden Age arc. Anything beyond that, my memory gets a little fuzzy. But yeah, I'm a massive fan of that arc, Griffith in particular.
That's the same for me. Yeah, it gets so big, and there's so many characters and side characters and arcs that I just go, whoa, this is too much. And I like it. The art is beautiful, but it's hard to follow sometimes. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, the Golden Age feels more intimate, I feel, with the characters and stuff.
I did notice a lot of flashbacks even throughout the story when you go into like the hundreds and 200s of the episodes, which is a fascinating technique for telling a story, because it's like, oh, we should have known about this, back in the 20s and the 30s. But he tells a story that way. So it's kind of like, oh, this is kind of like cheating, I guess. You just tell this story of this big important event that happened between these two characters years and years ago.
Like in the latest chapter, I believe, like there's a flashback or like a callback to like the first chapter of Berserk when I think it's the first chapter of Golden Age arc when Guts is just lonely sitting on top of the wall with his sword on his lap. Yeah. It's just like there's like 3 flashbacks of that moment alone.
Cool. I mean, it's definitely a technique that I've seen a lot in Berserk. So that's, whether that was planned or he wants to provide context, it works for some people. That's great. Anyway, we can ramble on about how much we like the show and how much we like the manga, but let's get into the video. And I've watched a few other videos with, I think, a similar title, and I realized this was an actual meme like 5 years ago, and I wasn't aware because I didn't really pay attention to anime or manga memes. So I'm guessing, is that the point of the title? Because it's kind of like saying the villain of a story is villainous. It's like, well, yeah, obviously he's a mercenary leader. He kills people. He gets people to kill for him. I mean, it's kind of a given that he's morally in that category. You can't say that killing is good, right?
That video title was a meme title. I didn't actually argue in the video that Griffith literally did nothing wrong.
I assume that, yeah.
I even went over you guys even went over the part at the start where I said that Griffith isn't perfect and that all I'm doing is drawing a moral equivalence between Guts and Griffith to say that people's hatred of human Griffith is overblown, not that he literally did nothing wrong. So, but you kind of kept talking about how I was arguing that Griffith did nothing wrong.
Well, yeah,
which I never actually did. I never stated that in my video.
The reason
but I
why-
understand the confusion.
Yeah, the reason why we do that is a lot of people base their video on a title. And it's kind of like, okay, well then the video should be about the title. And it ends up not being. And we're just sitting there going, what's the point? But in this case, it's a meme. This is an ongoing joke as the years went by. I wasn't aware of that because I wasn't a Berserk fan at the time. And it's like, oh, okay, so this is just a thing that people want to get to know. They find your video, they go, okay, cool. So that I have to get out of the way because it's like, okay, obviously he's not perfect. Obviously, he's in a very dark fantasy world where a lot of people are doing a lot of bad things. So I think that's fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, and meme titles like that I use, I also sort of use it to gauge how much of the video the people in my comment sections have actually watched. I have another video called Why Griffith is Legally Innocent, which is another meme title. I don't literally argue that he's legally innocent. That's silly. I simply use legal examples of sort of concepts like informed consent, voluntary intoxication, stuff like that, as examples of my moral beliefs and practice. And so when people comment on those videos and say, oh, well, he can have legally done nothing wrong, that doesn't make sense, he killed a load of people, I can sort of get an idea of how much of my video people actually watch.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of a very gray area when you're talking about legal areas of, well, just say the states. They have a legal jurisdiction of all different kinds of tariffs and God knows what else that is considered good or bad, or sentencing is good or bad, or high or low. That would be a mess. Yeah, I don't think anyone can make like the Arizonian legal system says this, well, the Floridian legal system says that. It's like that's not going to go anywhere fast. So
yes.
Anyway,
I was just about to ask like which state this is based on, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so we're going to start at let's say the 50-second mark for our first question, just to see where we're going. Okay, that's a good start. Let me just. This is a very finicky player, so let me just make sure that Watch Together is doing the job. Okay, I'm at 50. There we go. So we're going to hit the play button for a few seconds and see what happens.
The sympathy for what he went through. This caught my eye most.
Okay, totally screwed up. I apologize. Scroll back a bit. There we go.
Notice two patterns when it comes to Griffith discourse. One, that no one understands the guy, like at all. And two, that no one's giving him the appropriate amount of sympathy for what he went through. This caught my eye most recently when I made a post on Reddit defending Griffith for his selfless actions throughout the Golden Age arc.
Okay, so there's a good point. No one's giving Griffith the appropriate amount of sympathy for what he went through. Okay, so what exactly should we be sympathizing with Griffith?
Well, first of all, we'll start from his childhood. You should be sympathetic to his situation and how he was materially necessitated to rise in status. In the response video you made, I noticed that you said that unlike Guts, Griffith had quite a comfortable childhood. You said that there's no evidence that he was poor, but this is actually really not true. In the fountain scene with Charlotte during his dream speech, at the end of that speech, he says that there were times when he was a boy when he wasn't even able to afford a slice of bread. So that shows that he should be sympathized with for wanting to get out of that situation. Unlike a lot of the Hawks, he was materially necessitated to go out and kill because he was literally starving. So there's that, first of all. Second of all, once he actually entered the battlefield at 12, 13 years old, he realized that it was a really horrible place and a lot of men were dying for him. And that traumatizes him. So we should feel sympathy for him for that. and his emotional repression in general. While it was a mistake, you can of course sympathize with it, just like we sympathize with Guts when he represses his emotions, which happens a lot, be it through his sexual trauma from Donovan or later on in the Black Swordsman arc. Guts does a lot of it as well. And then third of all, we should sympathize with him for how he was manipulated in the Eclipse. In my previous video, I kind of skimmed over the Eclipse because I assumed that no one really cared. They only really care about what he did to Casca, because I get a lot of comments saying that they understand what Griffith did and they would do the same in his situation and all that. But yeah, since that video, I've come up with a lot stronger arguments as to why Griffith is innocent in terms of the sacrifice of the Eclipse. He was manipulated by the God Hand, and really, and we should feel sympathy for him for that, for the mental state he was in at the time.
Okay, well, the reason why we feel sympathy towards characters is that we are concerned about them. Now, if you were to say, why don't we empathize with Griffith? Like, that would be a very rational thing to do, because we do that in general when we hear a story. I think the difference is because people dislike Griffith for his actions. They don't want to feel remorse or care about his upbringing because the results speak for themselves. So he may have come from a horrible background. He may have had people die for him, but the end result sort of washes that away and says, oh, okay, this is not a person worth sympathizing for.
Yeah, well, I think people are misinformed about his actions and his level of accountability for said actions. Well, we can
Before we get into that, I sorry to interrupt, but like you said that we were arguing that like he wasn't poor. Did we actually say that?
Yes, I don't know which one it was, but yeah, you did say that.
Okay, well, yeah, that is fair, but like in no way, or shape or form, like Griffith had to go through like to a war zone from like the very day that he was born. Like it's just incomparable. Like of course, like all people in Berserk are having a shitty life unless they are like part of the royalty. That we can even see. I think the Lost Children arc is like a perfect example for that. Like you can just like see it from the perspective of like a little poor girl that like gets abused at home and like just runs away from home because like that's just literally hell for her to live. So it's just like the normal peasants, like what kind of life they have when they don't have to participate in the war. It's like that. That's all I wanted to say.
I mean, how old is Guts when he joins the battlefield? I think he's about
6.
6.
Six, yes.
I'm guessing
like he's carrying the sword.
Yeah, I'm guessing Griffith was around 12 or 13. Of course, Guts got raped as a 9-year-old. Griffith sort of was sexually abused by Ganon at around 13 or 14.
But
and I know
he was willing to do that. It was his own choice to get raped.
You do talk about choice, but he was 14. So
yes, but like it was his choice to get sold for sex. Yeah.
Yes, but
he was doing it for money.
Yeah, he was a minor though.
Absolutely, that it is disgusting. I absolutely agree with that. But like the fact that he did that to save more people from his army, just as you said, that is exactly what happened. But like, it is disgusting. But it was his choice to get raped, and not Guts was helpless.
Yeah, I know that, but and I'm not suggesting that what Griffith went through there was as bad or worse than what Guts went through. Obviously, what Guts went through was worse, but it was still bad, and it can still be sympathized with. Also, this whole thing with the sort of because he chose to do it, therefore it's okay.
No, it's not okay. It's
not okay. Okay, yeah, I worded it wrong, but in terms of the sacrifice at the Eclipse, I got the impression that because he chose to sacrifice his men, therefore he is accountable. That the choice in itself indicates consent, and we don't have to think about how informed that decision was, or the power dynamic between the accepting party and the offering party. None of that matters because he said yes to the sacrifice. And recently, I've begun arguing that informed consent does matter in terms of Griffith's agreement to the contract, and because he was manipulated, he's therefore unaccountable for the consequences of the contract.
Do
And
you
the
mean the
God Hand
manipulation for the God Hand during the eclipse?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I went off the rail.
Nah,
sorry.
it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, that was a very straightforward question about why should we sympathize for a character. This is based off the concept of drama, and we either like a character or we don't for whatever reason the individual viewer cares about. So sympathy is a very specific emotion, whereas empathy is understanding what a character is going through. If you can't comprehend that in the narrative, either the narrative is not clear enough, you're not paying attention. So I at least hope that people could empathize with the characters and then say, I like this character because, or I dislike this character because. So
yeah, I mean, I think that if you can sympathize with Guts, you must also sympathize with Griffith, because
no.
they
That's what I
did
just said.
basically go through the same thing.
You either like
That's my argument.
You either like the character and you can sympathize, but I like Guts, but I don't care to sympathize for him. I don't need to. It's not my prerogative to sympathize for fictional characters. It doesn't bother me. But I can empathize with Griffith easily because the story is very clear what happened to him. I don't need to feel pity for him, for example. I don't need to go through that sense of shame or retribution, whatever he had to go through. You see, I don't need to do that in a dramatic play or an operetta or a movie. It's not my prerogative to cry or laugh, right? It's just, I don't have that emotion in me, right? So I think the word sympathy is a bit too strong. And I think you want to keep going back to empathy, because that means that I can understand the narrative like you do and say, oh, you're right. Yeah, I wasn't aware. I forgot about this in the story. That would make me care more about him in that regard. That's fine, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, let's go on to, where are we? 1 minute and 45 seconds. Let's just see what that is. I might have to rewind a bit. I might have written these poorly down. Okay, here we go.
Laying out the case, not to say that Griffith is perfect, but that he is about as moral as Guts, and shouldn't be hated any more than him.
Okay, that's interesting. So why is Griffith as moral as Guts, and why should we like him or dislike him just as much as Guts?
Because Guts and Griffith made the same mistakes in terms of emotional repression, and the only difference in the outcome of their characters was pure luck. I'll go into this and explain it. Griffith repressed his emotionality and denied how he truly felt towards Guts and the Hogs, and that led him to freak out when Guts left, and he slept with Charlotte, and he fucked his whole life up based on one night of being in a really emotional state of mind. Guts did the exact same thing after the eclipse. He tried to repress his emotions. There's a very cool speech in chapter 2, I believe, where Guts basically echoes Griffith in his dream speech, where he talks about to get what he wants, he squashes the bugs at his feet, and he doesn't care about other people. He doesn't really feel emotions. He just likes killing. But it's obvious that that's a lie, because of course
it is a lie, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a parallel to Griffith. Guts.
Are you still here?
For two.
Oh, we're losing you.
Can't deal with it. Hello?
Sorry, like it cut your voice. Can we change the region? Maybe it can stabilize the connection.
Okay, 1 second.
How do I?
Okay. I'll try. How's Hong Kong? Let's try Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, yeah.
Hello from Hong Kong. How we
Is
doing?
everyone?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
Where was I at before I was cut off?
Not 10 seconds after like the reference to chapter 2 in the manga about Guts faking his emotions.
Oh yeah, so that's a parallel to Griffith. And so Guts represses his trauma after the eclipse, and essentially deals with that by abandoning Casca in the Elf Cave and going off for 2.5 years to go and slay monsters. At any point there, Casca could have died, she could have been hurt, and so could Guts. And we would sympathize with him if that did happen. So the only difference is luck. Guts could have very well have suffered the consequences of his emotional repression, but he didn't. And he had 2.5 years of freedom to contemplate his problems and his issues and what was going wrong with him. And he had that long to figure out that what he was doing was wrong, and then he was able to go back to Casca.
Okay.
That makes him privileged. And
okay, wait a second.
With Griffith...
Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying morality is based on emotional repression?
What? No. I'm saying that it's a bad thing to do that.
Okay, yeah,
and,
but we're talking about
Guts and
morality.
Griffith made this...
So morality to me is
No,
like,
weren't we talking about sympathy? What were we talking about?
Oh,
why? Yes. What do you think that Griffith did that was immoral that Guts hasn't done?
Well, before that, I would like to respond to like the Guts criticism, because like, well, yes, he was away 2 years, but like he gets called out for that by Gurut, the blacksmith, that like he didn't care about the things that like he had around him, and like he just pursued this waged war, like this act of vengeance, because like, well, I don't really understand like what you were going for about like what exactly like he could have done in that cave. He was just like chilling there with Casca and like maybe like try to get her potato brain back to normal, which is impossible. Like they needed to like get some help for that. So they were actively targeted because of the brand. So he had to go and hunt those apostles to figure out like what is happening. Like he was going for that mission to figure out a way to like get back at the God Hand. But like,
my point is that Guts had that privilege. He had that amount of time. Griffith made one mistake in his entire life in freaking out with the princess, and his life was fucked up irreversibly. He had no way to learn from his mistakes like that. Guts had the privilege of time. They made the same
that is
mistake.
not a privilege of being actively haunted by demons, and like every single time, like you were sleep deprived and such things like that. That is not a privilege.
I understand that, but I'm talking about privilege in terms of having the time to ponder your mistakes, not in general.
So Griffith didn't have 1 year to be hung up from a rope and think about his whatever his condition was.
Yeah, okay, but his life was already fucked up by that point.
But he had
no opportunity to learn from his mistakes and then improve.
Wait, you saying you couldn't?
Oh, and by the way, he did recognize his problem and where he'd been going wrong in the dungeon. In the inner monologues in the dungeon, he expresses regret about how he repressed his emotions towards Guts. The problem is it's too late and there's nothing he can do about that now. He does acknowledge
which chapter is that?
Chapter 49. He expressed, when he's listing all of his emotions, one of the emotions that he says he's feeling is regret towards Guts, and the whole inner monologue is about him finally acknowledging that Guts is the only person who made him forget his dream. He's like, why is this one person making me feel so emotional? He's actually acknowledged it now that he's made that mistake. He's embraced his emotionality, but it's too late.
I'm reading the chapter while you can carry on, Smart.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to understand that you're equating morality should be equal, or saying that it should be equal, because of time to do something.
Well, I'm not referring to morality. I think in my video, can we go back a bit? Did I say that? I said that he shouldn't be hated any more than him. And people hate characters not just because of morality. They may hate their personalities. You said Griffith was a narcissist and stuff. So you may hate Griffith for his mistakes in repressing his emotions, you might think that's sad and pathetic, but you might not hate Guts for the same reasons because he pushed beyond that. But what I'm saying is that Guts had the opportunity to push beyond that and learn from it and create a better life for himself. Griffith didn't have that opportunity. It was totally down to luck. And I actually think this is a flaw in the storytelling and Miura's presentation of his themes. But yeah.
Okay, let's put play here.
Haven't already. I also want to make clear that I'm laying out the case not to say that Griffith is perfect, but that he is about as moral as Guts, and shouldn't be hated any more than him. I'm going to be...
Okay, so you say he's about as moral and shouldn't be hated as much, or as more than him. Those are two different things, right? Okay, I could hate Griffith for raping Casca and killing his team, right? That's totally normal, right? That's a simple thing to hate for. Okay.
Fair.
I could also hate someone more because of that than another person wandering around for 2 years, right? I can do that.
Okay, but that's not what we were comparing.
What are we comparing?
Well, we were just comparing emotional repression between Guts and Griffith. But
Okay,
if you want to get into the rape and the sacrifice, that's what my video is about. That's what I'm defending.
Okay,
I'm telling you why you shouldn't hate him for that.
Okay, so we're talking about time then and emotional repression to express that time, and a year is too long or 2 years is too long or whatever the case is, right?
I'm saying that the parallel between Guts and Griffith in terms of emotional repression, you can't use that parallel to draw a moral conclusion or a conclusion like a moral of the story that Griffith is worse because he repressed his emotions. Guts is better because he overcame that. You shouldn't make that. You can't make that conclusion because the context of their situations is fundamentally because the context of their situations is different. Griffith didn't have the opportunity to improve.
But you said the problem is emotional repression, right? They're both doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So Griffith shouldn't be hated any more than Guts.
Okay, wait.
I'm making it Yep.
We've established the problem is emotional repression, right? Okay.
Okay.
Why are they repressing their emotions? One of them is because Guts has been traumatized. He ran away. He's fighting demons. He's being chased by demons. He's doing whatever. He's trying to get by. I think he goes back to do the things he's good at, which is swinging his sword. That's his raison d'etre. Right?
Yes, that's all he's good at.
So he goes back to the thing that makes him happy or effective or functional or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the reason. But that's equally as bad as when Griffith represses his emotions when? Like, what am I comparing here?
When he represses his emotions on the snowy hill when Guts tries to leave. If you remember in my last video, when Griffith says, "You belong to me," when he snaps back into that persona that he hadn't really adopted for 3 years by that point, when he snaps back into that's him repressing his true emotions towards Guts. He's snapping back into that persona as a defense mechanism.
Okay, so he's distraught, depressed, whatever. He's feeling something, or if he's depressed, he's feeling nothing. And then he goes to Charlotte to make himself feel better or to gain something out of his loss. He wants to feel better, obviously.
I always saw that inappropriate moment as like a way that like he wants power again. He wants to feel powerful again.
Yeah, he's lost something.
Is your argument that Guts is more justified in repressing his emotions because he went through something worse?
Is that what you're saying? The comparison of emotion, of repressing it, is indicative of the emotion itself and the situation that led to it. So I could have an emotion about cutting my hands and feel good, but that would be a dumb thing because I'm hurting myself, but for whatever reason my brain is wired, or I don't know, I've been classically conditioning myself to like pain or something like that. Like that would be morally wrong. Someone should step in and stop me, or else I'll be cutting myself and eventually hurting myself, right? So you can't equate emotional repression, the act itself, the same way someone else is repressing emotion, because they have their own conditions, their own environment, their own situations as to why they're doing that.
Right, but they are repressing these same kinds of emotions. They're denying their emotionality. They're designing.
Not the same. Like, every single time Guts does something that is over the line, he feels regret over it. Like just think about like the Black Swordsman arc, like the end of it, when he was telling the little girl to just kill herself after he killed off the slug count, and then like he turns around and like he does all of that so like he can give a reason for that poor girl to like live on, just so she can hate him.
Yeah.
And then he starts crying, like he hates this life. He hates every single. And even when I didn't want to like go this ahead when the rape happened between, well, not the rape, but like that moment happened between Guts and Casca when they were on the road alone, and he got taken over by the Beast of Darkness. Fuck, I almost died to say. That's my train of thought. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I was trying to say is, go ahead.
That regret also
like, yeah,
applies
okay,
to
I
Griffith,
got it back.
He also regrets a lot of the things that he does, and he feels bad about it.
Where does he display that? Like the lake scene. That is one, but like that is very early on his journey to form an army.
Nope, that's not true. There's the lake scene. There's the scene after he kidnaps Foss's daughter. Then there's the entire Eclipse vision.
That is worrying about his public image.
No, it wasn't.
Because like he asked Guts, who is like he is the closest friend he has. Like Guts is the only one who knows about the assassination. No one in the Hawks would just accept and like just go with that kind of thing.
No, but we already know from the context of the lake scene that he genuinely does feel like he's cruel. He's not only caring about his self-image, his image from Guts' perspective.
That is a very normal thing for like any kind of person who is leading an army, that like he feels like that like
so he does feel regret just like Guts. He feels
very
bad.
early. Not like Guts.
No, because
Guts is very different.
No, because him saying, "Do you think I'm cruel, Guts?" That shows a continuity from when Griffith was like 14 in the lake scene, all the way up to the Golden Age arc, all the way up to the Queen mini arc, and later on, the God Hand show Griffith images of visions of the dead child soldiers. So clearly, he's still affected by it and still feels bad about it because the God Hand literally used that. To play on Griffith's empathetic guilt in the Eclipse. So he never loses that empathy in the time skip whatsoever. In fact,
that was the God Hand pushing him over, yes, because that was probably his last bit of empathy, just because like he didn't understand, like, well, if I allow this, like, can I still look good in front of these people? He's like a narcissistic sociopath, so like every single time he asks like these things, like the fountain scene with Charlotte too.
If he was a sociopath, why would the God Hand bother playing on his empathetic guilt? If he was a sociopath, he wouldn't feel guilt. He wouldn't feel enough guilt to be clawing at his own arms while going on an erratic rant about all the men that died for him in the lake scene and how he must atone for their deaths.
It's an easy way to like push someone towards like addiction. I thought like that's a kind of like thing, like, oh, I did a bad thing, like, but there's no way to stop now. Why stop now? Just go ahead and go achieve that goal.
Okay, but those scenes still prove that he's not sociopathic.
Wait a second. Okay, we're talking about people in a fantasy world who kill people, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So if you are in a world where you're killing people, you're a sociopath. All right. You the more you do it,
like look at his face when the fountain and Charlotte gets informed that like, oh no, the little boy Adonis gets killed. Look at those eyes.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's a reason that the dream speech scene comes directly before the next arc in which we explore Griffith's backstory with Casca at the lake scene, when we discover that he has a very traumatic history with dead children and he attempts to repress his emotions towards dead children.
That is not repressing. No one is looking at, like, Charlotte just looked away and like that was the real Griffith. Every
No, it
time
was
he gets what he wants, he has that smug
okay.
ass expression.
Let me ask you a question. How do
Go
you
ahead.
know that he was smiling specifically at the child dying rather than him ignoring the child dying and simply smiling at the fact that Julius had died? How do you know he was basking in the fact that the child had died? How do you know that he was enjoying that rather than him just ignoring it and compartmentalizing it like we have evidence of him doing in the narrative?
Because he can't be lying all the time. Like there's no way that he can hide all of his emotions.
Well,
And
he does.
like
He can't in the end.
even has like he expresses that like and like people would look at that. Like,
Well, yeah, the whole point
what
of
kind
his
of image
story was
would you
that
have with the guy Griffith?
he was ultimately unable to successfully repress his emotions, and that how he ended up in the dungeon scene. He didn't admit to himself the emotions he was feeling.
Well, because he's a narcissist and he could
No,
not
because he's a
accept
narcissist,
defeat.
because he's been traumatized by the deaths of so many soldiers.
Wait.
So he went on to have
confronted
sexual
that,
advances
Wait a
on
second,
Charlotte,
wait a second.
who was a minor
Yes.
at the
How
time.
many
Yes.
how many deaths of soldiers are we talking here?
Tens of thousands.
Thousands? Okay.
Tens of thousands.
I don't know if you know this, but the more you do something, the less emotionally involved you become, right? Like if you take a roller coaster
that's
ride,
kind of why I brought up that like at the lake scene was probably early in his career.
maybe.
But
Okay,
like
you can
he-
say
didn't he had the dialogue that he already had like tens of
Yeah.
thousands of soldiers dying.
every 10
Oh.
battles he loses hundreds of soldiers, right?
Well, you can say that in real life, in psychology.
What?
The more you do something, the less you care. But we have evidence from the narrative, the end of the Golden Age arc, in the Eclipse, of Griffith being absolutely, completely horrified at all the people that have died for him. So clearly,
Wait, where is
he
that?
hasn't been desensitized to it.
Where is that?
The chapter 77, when he's confronted with the pile of corpses, when he's apologizing profusely to them over and over and over again.
Okay, that's well after the fact that we're talking about the Griffith in.
But you said that over time he became numbed to the soldiers that he killed. When obviously that isn't the case, because right up to the end of the Golden Age arc, remember we're talking about human Griffith.
Yeah.
Right up to that point, he was feeling just as much agonizing, empathetic guilt towards his soldiers.
Okay, so this is a
as he'd ever
flashback,
done.
right? This is a flashback that Mira just pulls up out of nowhere, right?
No,
not a flash,
this is
no.
the eclipse. Like when, well, he gets manipulated into by the members of Godhand by showing him images of the corpses, and
that's
like
an
then
illusion.
they show the castle, and
Right.
that you need to build your way through the corpses.
Right, exactly.
Yes,
a
it's
big illusion.
it's an illusion, but they're playing on his empathetic guilt to convince him to sacrifice them.
But like,
Basically,
what is the
they say-
last thing that he says before accepting the deal? That Guts was the only person that made him
The only
forget about
person
his-
that made him forget his... Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what's your point?
My point is that like ultimately he's asked like, okay, well, do you want this dream? No, okay, like then like fuck him, like let's kill all of them.
I don't understand.
We're gonna go back to like that. Like ultimately he made the choice that he wants to sacrifice them, no matter like what they are, like what
Yes,
did
but-
they mean for him.
Yes, but Griffith acted on the Hawks' consent.
Hawks is how?
Yep.
Like none of them
absolutely.
were happy to be annihilated by demons. Like
Never
okay, just a moment. Like I understand that like the Hawks have signed up that like okay, we're gonna die for you, Griffith. We're gonna go war with to this war zone to fight the war that you want to do. But in no shape form they sign up to be fighting with demons, just gonna torn them into shreds.
That's absolutely 100% true. You're right on that. The
Yeah,
Hawks did not
all of them are
actually-
horrified.
The Hawks did not actually consent to be sacrificed, but Griffith acted on what he perceived to be their consent as manufactured by the God Hand. The God Hand lied to him that the Hawks will forgive him for being sacrificed and will celebrate in his successes in the afterlife, for they have always loved him. That is what the God Hand tell Griffith. That
But
even if they are now crushed by despair, once they realize what Griffith has done, they will forgive him and they will welcome him warmly. So the God Hand are bringing up the consent of the Hawks because they know that Griffith values the consent of the Hawks in his mind. This falls completely in line with his characterization. In the lake scene, his justification for allowing so many men to die is that they chose to fight those battles, just as he chose to fight his. That's always been the reason why he feels like it's okay for these people to die, and the God Hand play into this. Griffith is in a mentally compromised state, and the God Hand use the fact that they demonstrated that they could read minds, and they used this to lie to Griffith that the Hawks would consent to be sacrificed. What they were actually cryptically referring to was the fact that when they went into the vortex of souls, they would lose their individuality, and as part of the collective subconscious, they would help Griffith and cheer him on as part of the collective subconscious, which controls the idea of evil, which twists fate. But they didn't tell Griffith that.
Okay.
They were very cryptic about it.
Oh, okay. So, like, you agree that, like, the God Hand is evil?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, then how do you explain the idea of evil? Like, the god of this universe, so-called.
You want me to explain the idea of evil?
No, like, as in, like, what is your opinion? Because, like, it's, like, very clear in that chapter that, like, all the events that formed around Griffith, like, even his creation was just manipulated by fate, like, causality.
Well,
Like,
that
he
also,
was
that's
meant
also,
to be doing these actions. Like, he has been... We could even say that, essentially, like, all of this was, like, fated to be happening the way it is. And, like,
Well,
Griffith is enjoying it.
I don't. Well, Griffith is enjoying it after he already had his personality changed by the transformation, but we'll get to that in a bit. Hold on, I just completely lost my trail of thought. What were you saying? What was I answering?
We were talking about the idea of evil, I believe.
I don't really care about the fate and causality argument. It is, if anything, it is a defense of Griffith that and the God Hand appealed to fate when they were manipulating him. They said they literally, and I quote, "There is no other choice." They appeal to fate and God's will. They tell him that this will happen. They strip him of any real choice, and Griffith has no way to know otherwise. He's in a hallucinogenic state, and he's immortal. These ideas are beyond his comprehension.
First off, there's a ritual every 216 years where you have to make the choice to become whatever you're part of the God Hand or this apostle or that apostle. Yeah, so he had to make the choice. Now, you were saying he was manipulated. Yeah, he was manipulated, but that happened after he already gave the speech of what he says, yes, what is the point of regretting anything, and all that little talk when he's carrying the dead body up in the illusion. So that's well after or well before anything else is said, like, oh, you should go, all these people will die for you, they'll be happy about that. That's Slannis saying that word, where this is before Ubik is revealing himself. So he's already made up his mind.
No, that speech is in reference to what good would be giving up now. How would that help the dead? What good would that do for the dead for him to give up now? That would mean that their dreams are wasted. He wants to appease the souls of the dead, which is another selfless motivation.
No, he's not. He's saying this. Yes, what is the point of regretting anything? What is the use of repenting my sins? What can I possibly say to those who have died? I cannot apologize to them now. This is the path that I have chosen. If I regret my actions or seek atonement, then it is all over, and I will never reach my destined goal. He's just saying, this is what I want, which is the castle and the kingdom. That's it.
Yes, but if we look at the context of the whole scene and what the God Hand are saying, they're talking about regret and atonement in terms of giving up and not piling up the corpses, stopping doing that. He says there's no point. They tell him, you can't stop doing that. How do you think the dead child soldier would feel if you stopped and apologized? How do you think he would feel? And then they show him the dead child soldier saying, I want to be a knight. And then Griffith starts screaming. They're absolutely appealing to what the dead want. Griffith is motivated by a sunk cost fallacy predicated on the inherent value of his men's lives, dreams, and labor. Let me quote the lake scene, because this is really important. Griffith says, hold on, I've got to get it up. He says something along the lines of, hold on, I'll get it up 1 second.
I have it written down. What is
chapter 17. I've got it up. Hold on. Let me just quote it directly. Okay. But if for their sakes, for this, okay, let me go a bit. I don't feel responsible for my comrades who've lost their lives under my command because they themselves chose to fight. He's referring to consent. But if for their sakes, for the sake of the dead, if there's something I can do, that thing is to win. I'll keep winning to fulfill my dream to which they clung, putting their lives on the line. My dream can only be realized by building upon their corpses. It's a blood-smeared dream after all. I have neither regret or remorse about that. But for hundreds, thousands of lives to hang in the balance and myself alone not to be unclean, my dream can't enter my grasp so easily as that. So he clearly is motivated by a sunk cost fallacy where he believes that he can't stop now, because if he does, then the dead would have died for nothing. This is the dream that they clung to in life. That's the one thing he can do for the dead. That's his motivation. And the God Hand are reminding him of that. They're reminding him of what he'd repressed. Because this is a moment where his mask slips in the lake scene momentarily.
Okay.
And we see his true motives
If that's the
before
case,
he represses it again.
If that's the case, he's doing it.
Why isn't he lying at that time, though? Like, how can we make sure that he's not lying at this moment?
Because his actions contradict his words. At the start of the scene, he insists that the reason that he whored himself out was for money. He said he thought about it logically. It wasn't because he cared about that boy, not at all. He says that to Casca. It's because it will allow him to achieve his dream faster. But then when Casca mentions the boy, he starts shaking and he says, "But," and then he starts rambling about the men that have died for him. And the most obvious evidence that he's not lying here is that when Casca goes to comfort him, Griffith says, "Don't worry, it was nothing," and he goes back to his own self. He's not admitting that those true emotions. He doesn't want Casca to see that. So it's not a projection of any sort of lie. It was his true feelings that he let out momentarily that he's embarrassed about. And I'd also like to say, and this is the most important thing, that when Casca goes to hug Griffith from behind in that lake scene, that is a direct parallel, even compositionally, to when Guts accidentally breaks down with Casca during sex, and he momentarily allows himself to reveal his sexual trauma and what happened with Donovan. Casca hugs him from behind in the exact same way, and unlike Griffith, he didn't say, "Don't worry, it was nothing." He accepts her offer for affection. So this parallel proves that, just like Guts in that scene, Griffith has momentarily allowed himself to be vulnerable and show his true state of mind to Casca. But then he doesn't let her in past that. He goes back, unlike Guts, and that's part of the parallel between Guts and Griffith.
Okay.
So that is part of the way that we know that he's not lying there.
Well, let's not try and guess the mental state of whether someone's lying or telling the truth. That's a little more complicated that our simple little minds can't quite figure out. It's a little hard.
Why, hold on. Why not? Why can't we?
Because it's
figure out from context.
Because
Why can't we
you're
do that?
speculating a mental state. You have no idea the causes of effects.
Yeah, but that's what you always do with media, unless it's spelled out for you by the author. You have to use a bit of inference, but the evidence is absolutely overwhelming. In the last video,
no, it's not.
Well, I'll give you some more if you want it.
Well,
but in the very last response, okay, that's okay.
Because
I'm sorry.
Because you've been sort of like going, well, he's this, he's that. It's like, okay, slow down there, because we sort of went through that.
I'm sorry.
And no, you have a lot to say. That's why we brought you on. It's just that that scene can be interpreted in many different ways. And I do believe the boy represents, or the dead soldier boy represents that aspect that, oh yeah, these are people who have died. But you miss the context of that scene as well. He's just been found out by Casca the day prior that he was sleeping with Genin. And he got found out. He's like, oh crap. And he goes to wash himself on the day after. I assume it's the day after. I don't know when exactly it was. I'm assuming that's because he feels guilty or he feels dirty. He did this horrible thing because you go to the river to wash yourself. That's just obvious, I would assume, unless he just goes to the river every day or every week or whatever the day is. And he asks him, or she asks him, hey, you mean like that boy? That's what happened, because that's part of the scenario, what happened. He says, no, I don't. I came to this conclusion rationally, which brings less risk, losing hundreds of soldiers in 10 battles, or snaring a rich old man. So that's his logical reason for doing that. Okay? And to me, that means, oh, I've encountered death so many times. It's not bothering me. But this thing with this old man creeped me the hell out. That's a very simple explanation. I'm not trying to delve into his mental state. I'm not trying to figure out if he's, feeling dirty. He might be physically dirty. I don't know. Maybe that guy did a number on his ass. I have no clue. But
okay.
It's straightforward for me. Okay. So,
okay. Well, how do you reconcile that with the next couple of pages where he starts tearing his arms out while talking about what he can do for the sake of the dead and the children that have died for him, the hundreds, thousands of lives that hang in the balance? He's telling himself he can't be unclean.
Well,
what is that about?
No,
if
he's not actually.
feeling
He's
guilt?
saying, let me just read that for you. I have it down here. To realize my dreams, I will perch on top of their corpses. It is a blood-smeared dream. After all, I don't regret or feel guilty about it. And the manga is slightly different, but it's pretty much the same meaning. But to risk thousands
What
of
translation are you using? What
I
translation
have no
are you using?
idea which is which.
Oh, well, I'm using the official Dark Horse translation,
that's
but I don't know which one you're using.
They mean pretty much the same thing. But to risk thousands of lives while never getting myself dirty, it's not a dream that can be so easily realized. He's not saying I should get my hands dirty. He's saying it's not a dream that can be so easily realized, meaning I could get my hands dirty, but I don't have to. But pretty much I have to.
No, he's saying, but for hundreds, thousands of lives to hang in the balance and myself alone not to be unclean, what I want won't enter my grasp so easily as that. He's saying that he doesn't want to be hands-off about it. He feels guilty if so many of these people are dying for him, and he doesn't have to go through any of that. It's a classic self-harm thing. That's why he's self-harming.
Well, no.
It's part of why he's self-harming. He feels guilty about it.
Yeah, you feel guilty, but you could feel guilty for something else. You could feel disgusting with himself with having to sleep with Genin. That could be...
Okay, then what's he talking about here then? Why did he bring up the dead? Why did he bother bringing up the dead?
Because he's talking to Casca.
Clearly... Okay, but we just saw him say, "Don't worry, that was nothing."
Yeah.
And then in the dream speech and everywhere else, he said, "I don't care about my." So this one moment that he starts talking about his men, he then Casca tries to comfort him about that.
Exactly.
And then he says it was nothing.
Yeah, because he
tries to hide that.
Yeah, he's like, "Don't worry about it. I'm fine. Don't worry about it." When she hugs him, she's
he's obviously not telling the truth there.
How do you know that?
Are you joking?
Are you? Listen, he just said it's nothing. Why is he lying? Because he had this soliloquy or a big poem about...
Because he's scratching, because he dug his fingers so deep into his arm that they're bleeding. Okay, it's not nothing.
Where does that come from?
Doesn't want to acknowledge that.
When you say guilt, because when I talk to people who have had self-harm or they try to commit suicide, it doesn't come from a place of empathy or empathizing with someone else. Like, oh, I understand what I don't know how hundreds, if not thousands of people are going through. I don't know how he empathizes with that. I don't know how that's even physically possible to get to know someone and emphasize their dreams and blah, blah, blah. It seems almost impossible. It seems more likely...
Maybe you're not very empathetic. I don't know.
No, I went through psychology. I've talked to people who have some serious issues. I've done a few studies, but it's not, it's not...
You're saying it's impossible for a commander to feel immense guilt about a lot of people that they have killed. they've
in
led to
terms
death.
of empathy, where you're
That's
rationalizing,
impossible.
you think a
You
battalion
think you
commander,
can't empathize with strangers?
not to the point of self-harm, no.
Really?
Really? I've never met someone who
Well,
tried
okay,
to commit
well,
suicide or
okay.
tried to hurt themselves because of other person's problems. I've seen people who are stressed out. I've seen doctors who are stressed out. I've seen
I
journalists
don't really
who are stressed
care
out.
what you've seen. This is a story, and he's self-harming based on, because of the dead child soldier that he knew, not a stranger. He's self-harming
Okay.
because he knows it's his fault that he
Is
died.
empathy a good or bad thing? What is it?
Good.
Is
Good
it
thing.
always a good thing?
Not when it gets in the way of logic. But
Okay,
yeah.
so you're right.
Generally.
There is positive and negative empathy. Negative empathy is not really studied in psychology very well. It is there, but it's not addressed. If empathy is a good thing, we're generally speaking of the general description or definition. If empathy is a good thing, how can it hurt you?
It can make you feel because empathy allows you to walk in someone else's shoes. It allows you to feel things other people are feeling, and when you have empathy, you understand how other people might be suffering.
Empathy
And if you then
is a rationalization of what someone's going through. Sympathy is where you actually feel what someone is going through. You feel what they're
No, that's not true. That's affective empathy. There's a difference between cognitive and affective empathy. Cognitive empathy is where you understand that someone might be sad. Affective empathy is where you feel it.
Okay, well, now we're getting into nuances of what empathy is then. Okay, I'm just saying
It's a semantic argument. He feels bad, okay? Because he knows that someone was hurt and it's his fault.
Either empathy is a positive emotion or it's a negative emotion or it's something in between. Like, what is it? Do you feel...
Well, it depends on the context.
Well, okay, I'm a nice person. I empathize with everyone I come across, even the downtrodden, even the ones who commit suicide. And some days I get stressed out because I deal with so many people and I gotta take a break. Okay, now some people break down. Some nurses I've seen just can't take it. They just collapse. I haven't met anyone who's self-harmed themselves. Maybe they're just more mature, or maybe. But a lot of kids that came into the clinic were depressed. Like, they felt nothing. And to feel something, they try to commit suicide, which is a little different than having negative emotion. But they always came from a place that was bad. Like, something bad happened to them, or, you know, someone, like some family problem or some relative or that sort of thing. It always came from a place of negativity, never from a positive world. So they never were empathetic towards a family member who had a loss or a friend who died. Not to the point of them wanting to hurt themselves. I mean, it's possible. You could rationalize yourself.
Was it their fault? Was it their fault that a family member died?
No, not at all.
Have you met someone where someone else has died and that person knows it's their fault and they feel so bad about it that they self-harm? Like, I really don't care about your personal experience.
No, it's not the exact experience I'm referring to. I'm talking about empathy being a positive or negative thing. Because if it's negative, if you have a negative emotion or a negative experience that causes something bad, then self-harm can occur. And sometimes it's so extreme you go to depression, and then that occurs. I've never encountered there's brothers, there's nurses, and some journalists that were so sensitive that they hurt themselves. I've never encountered that. Only when stress was a thing. Only when stress was a factor. Like, a doctor was too stressed out. Any ODs on or barbiturates or whatever. That is where I'm seeing that from. Because if you're coming from something negative, you get negative out. If you come from a place of caring and sensitivity, unless you're overburdened, then I can't see someone self-harming as a result of that. To me, in this scene, he's feeling disgust. He's feeling a little bit of guilt, probably. I don't know exactly. I'm trying to guess what emotion that would equate to. But I can't really figure out what's in his mind, right?
I really don't understand your positive, negative empathy dichotomy thing that's going on here.
It's not a dichotomy. It's just, if empathy is good, good things come from it. If I can understand what's going through someone's scenario and it's a bad thing. That does not cause me in some sort of weird way to hurt myself.
It does if you are the reason they are suffering. And you can feel that. If you as an individual are the reason for that person suffering and you empathize with them, you are the problem you feel self-hatred for that and you self-harm.
Can the God hand see what's in Griffith's mind or soul or whatever?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
They show him they show him visions in the Eclipse where they basically lay out his entire history and past motivations, and then they use the fact that they can read minds to inform their lie that the Hawks consented as well.
So Griffith, like, once they have the whole thing with where he's walking up to the castle with the girl or the soldier boy, he says, "Was that an illusion or an illusion?" And Ubik says, "Not an illusion is the reality in your consciousness, reaching for the castle in the heavens, stacking bodies to reach the highest summit in your destiny, stepping on thousands of your comrades' bodies, and tens of thousands of bodies your comrades paved for you in turn." And then he says, "All while disregarding who or what they were, you trampled your way here." Now, maybe the translation is different, or I have a different version of that. To me, that says you didn't care. You didn't care who they were. You didn't care what they were.
Let me go to the chapter.
Sure. It's the whole passage. It's the whole creepy scene with all the God hand, and they're showing the one with guts was interesting. That was a weird scene.
Over thousands of your comrades' corpses, over tens of thousands of corpses they in turn amassed. Over those corpses with no identities, no names, you have trampled as you came, with but one desire in mind. There is no indication that he doesn't care here. I don't know which translation you're using, but it's widely accepted that the Dark Horse official translation is the most accurate. You might be using an older translation that I've looked at before, and they have a lot of dodgy translations. But
this is the anime.
The context is still the same.
Well, it's the anime.
This is the anime.
It's not the same. Because they add little lines of dialogue that aren't accurate. The entire last chapter was them showing him bodies of the people he had killed and him crying about that. And in the very next page, they talk about how the Hawks will forgive him for being sacrificed. They will welcome him warmly. Then he can go on living.
Yeah, that's Slan.
Because he can't.
That's the other character. Right?
Yes, that's Slan talking. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying that's from the anime. I don't know the exact manga representation.
Okay, well, the whole context of the Eclipse is a realization and an epiphany that he does actually care about his men. He always has. He's not going to repress that anymore. He's going to internalize and accept that empathetic guilt and act upon that.
How does he care about all the men that he's never met, or the hundreds, if not thousands, of men that have died for him? Like, how could he concern himself with all of their dreams?
What do you mean, how?
How do you?
He does. He just does.
He just knows
how do you
thousands
physically
of people?
do that?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't know them, but he knows that they had their own dreams. I don't understand. It's as if you can't empathize with strangers on the TV or something.
Well,
it's like only empathize with people who you know intimately.
No, I'm just saying that there's so many that you're supposed to care for them, when in reality we know that comrades, he calls comrades, are just comrades. They're not anything more important than that. They're just his...
Well, he knew a lot of them, and he knew his comrades, and he's acting on their perceived consent.
Yeah, we introduced, I don't know, like 5 or 6, I can't remember the Band of the Hawk main guys, but when he tells us that he loses hundreds every 10 battles, that means it doesn't really bother him. It's not a big deal, because he's gone through so many.
Also, I'd like to ask you this. Why are you applying real-life psychology to a fictional character that's been written? Maybe this is a criticism you want to take up with Berserk and the author, that the way that Griffith has been written to care about tens of thousands of soldiers isn't accurate to real life by your interpretation. That's not necessarily a criticism of me, because the text indicates that he does care. You can't appeal to real life psychology, or what sounds to be your own lived experience, not possessing much empathy, apparently.
No, I'm not arguing lived experience. I'm using the actual words, empathy, and what it means. And how you can actually care about 10 people's dreams or 100 people's dreams or 1,000 people's dreams and apparently 1,000 people's dead dreams. It's a little strange to be able to do that, and we don't know what they are, out of the assumption that they all want to join him in the kingdom and do something.
I mean, I empathize with millions of people in Ukraine right now who are like suffer. I empathize with that.
Yeah, I think we think war is bad. War is generally bad. No one is saying that.
And I feel that when I watch the news. I feel that. I empathize with that.
Okay.
I get teary-eyed sometimes.
Okay, well, I don't.
That is so it is okay. Well, but that still proves that it is possible for a human being to feel empathy for strangers, for a lot of them, because of their common humanity.
Not just because of emotions, but because we have the capacity to rationalize what's happening. So again, these words are not, they don't come out of the ether. We have words for a reason. Like you were saying, sociopathy or sociopath, like that has a psychological backing. Like we have to go back to the definition. When we say it's a narcissist, we know he's a narcissist. We have the definition. We've had it for a long time now.
Well, what's your definition of empathy then?
Being able to understand the emotional states of others.
Okay, so cognitive empathy. Okay, well, Griffith understands the emotional states of others.
What's cognitive empathy then? Because you know that.
Cognitive empathy is being able to understand.
Is that psychology?
That someone else is feeling.
Is that psychology?
Yeah, that's psychology.
Okay, so you're using your psychology. So what's wrong with you using your psychology and I can't use mine?
Let's argue the definitions then.
Well, no, we're not going into semantics. We're just saying the word empathy, and that's accepted. You accepted yours. I accepted it.
Okay. Okay. Well, what are you arguing then? This weird semantic argument. How are you undermining it? Said I don't understand what you're doing.
Well,
what are you talking about?
Okay, the thing with the Godhead, you see when they give this illusion. Now maybe they're lying. Whenever you have a story where the Deus Ex pops up, he says, "Okay, this is like." Well, not necessarily like the writer on board moment, but they are telling you what's what. Okay, this is how the world works. And when they say you don't care for who or what they were, to me that goes, oh, he doesn't care. Because God said so, or a God said so. The powers that be.
They didn't say that.
Well, they didn't in the anime.
Well, that's a mistranslation.
Which part?
Because
which
that
part are we talking
the
about?
Entire previous chapter.
That is in the Japanese, it's a Japanese version of the subtitles. I don't know who did the subtitles.
But which part are we talking about again?
The eclipse scene with the illusion.
The eclipse?
Yeah.
The illusion, okay.
Yeah, Ubik says, all while disregarding who or what they were, you trampled your way here. I could put it on YouTube if you want. It's from YouTube anyway. It's the
okay.
Episode
Well,
24.
how can... There's a way we can find out whether that translation is accurate. We can look at other scenes, like from the previous chapter.
Where
the God... No, let me read a bit of it.
The scene is the same whether it uses certain terminology. It's the same idea.
No, it's not, because the fact that Ubik in the very previous chapter showed him a vision of the dead child, and then when Griffith says, "I'm sorry," and Ubik says, "What a thing to say! You're the one that did that to them. You are the reason that all their dreams are no longer going to come into fruition." How can Ubik be appealing to Griffith's guilt towards their deaths, but then simultaneously also say, "You never cared"? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, the way that I read
if he never cared, they wouldn't have bothered showing him the men that he did care about to try and convince him, would they? If Griffith was this sociopathic character that didn't really care, then they wouldn't need to create all this pretense about the Hawks' consent and the pile of corpses. They just tell him, "Hey, if you sacrifice them, you'll become God. Do it," and he would do it. He needed to have been brought to this headspace by appealing to his empathetic guilt. That's what the entire chapter's about.
Yeah,
so this little mistranslation, it contradicts everything else in the sequence, so it's not a thing. And the most accurate translation doesn't include that.
Okay, but Griffith says, "But I never forced anyone to come along." This is part of the whole old woman illusion where he's talking to her and she's saying, "Well, you did all this. This is all you." And it's not just in the illusion. as we go through, I think it's from 1 to 30. When does the eclipse happen? I can't remember. It's 38. I can't remember the exact number. But even throughout with Guts, with the other characters, they're always saying you're doing
77.
77. Sorry, that's way off. As we go through the scenes where Griffith is killing the queen in her little circle, and their Guts is talking, it's like, hey, you're doing this for a reason. I've killed hundreds for you. What's a few other extra here? Doesn't matter where we do it. This is for your dream. Like, stop thinking this way. Like, there's always this mention of this dream. Like, he's a great guy. Everyone can't believe how amazing Griffith is. We're going to follow his dream. So that's an ongoing foreshadowing, I guess, for this event, you could say. But it's clear that that's part of the story, that this is a dream everyone's striving for. And everything's going pretty well until we get to the King of Midland and what happens there. So it's kind of like everyone's along for the ride.
Yeah. All right. If you want to argue that Griffith didn't care about his men and he didn't care about their consent, as you're claiming, then you have to disprove the idea. You have to disprove what I just said when I gave textual evidence that they told him that the Hawks would forgive him. You need to answer this question.
So when Slan just says that?
Why did Slan reassure Griffith that the Hawks would forgive him for being sacrificed if Griffith didn't care in the first place?
Because
why did she do that?
Slan is a bit, what is she? Like the goddess of, what is she? I can't remember what she represents.
Lust. The goddess of lust.
Okay,
Yes.
so maybe she's appealing to some of his emotions. I have no idea. But this is an illusion. Whatever they say is obviously not literal, even when we say, or all while disregarding who or what they were, you trampled your way here. So did he disregard them? I don't know. That's part of the speech. So I can assume it's the truth because the God is saying it. I don't know.
Actually, I have a question to you, Sichlitt. Like, do you believe like all apostles get rid of like their empathy once they do the transformation?
Are you gonna bring up the slug count?
Yes.
Okay.
Because God hand or whatnot, they are essentially just having the same transformation, don't they?
That's good. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's what my next video is gonna be about. I'm really into this
Okay.
now.
Well, like, how do you explain that?
The slug count lost some of his empathy.
Oh, okay.
In the hold on, let me go to it. Because I've written this all down. In the Count's second audience with the God Hand, Ubik tells him that by sacrificing Teresia, he will shed, quote unquote, any last remnants of his humanity, end quote, indicating that he still had some left and that another important sacrifice would complete the process. This indicates that the power of the transformation's psyche-altering, empathy-inhibiting effects are compounded and magnified by an increasing greater number of sacrifices, and this explains entirely why the Count is still able to feel some compassion for his daughter Teresia, but Femto can't feel anything. Also, Griffith is turned into a literal God Hand, not an apostle, so of course the transformation's much stronger for Femto. I've listed about 10 different reasons why the slug count cannot be used to prove that Griffith had a choice and did nothing wrong. There are so many reasons when you look at it from the lens of informed consent and informed knowledge of the sacrifice. For one, the Count had been through it before. He knew exactly what was on, what was happening. The God Hand never manufactured the consent of Teresia with the Count. The Count was never mentally ill. While he was on death's door, he still had full possession of his faculties. The God Hand actually told the Count that he would lose his empathy from the transformation. The God Hand never mentioned that to Griffith. It's only told to him by the idea of after the fact. So there was no consent to him losing his empathy. Griffith wasn't told about the vortex of souls. And with the count is literally in the backdrop. There's so many ways in which the count was much more informed about the terms and conditions of the contract in a way that Griffith just wasn't. Apostles.
I think they very clearly told Griffith that all of the Hawks will be sacrificed.
Yes, but they told him that they would forgive him for being sacrificed. They're manufacturing.
And he believed it. And he believed it completely. Yes. He made the choice to sacrifice them.
Yes, and I would understand your argument that he believed that, and therefore he is stupid, if not for the compromised mental state that he was in.
No, he's not stupid. Like, he completely understood all of these things, and like they gave him the power to not have those things like back him before that.
They didn't give him a choice to refuse a sacrifice.
Yes, they did.
They did not give him that choice.
Didn't they?
Well, they did. They said,
did they force him into that?
They did not force him, but well, they kind of did by appealing to fate and telling him that it would happen anyway. But they tell him that he will become a corpse if he doesn't sacrifice them. They also say, but I don't believe that Griffith is evil enough to be condemned if he acted on the will of his men. Because the distinguishing factor between the Hawks dying on the battlefield for Griffith and dying in the Eclipse is the consent argument. You said it yourself. The Hawks willingly chose to risk their lives for Griffith on the battlefield, but they did not consent to be eaten by literal demons. The moral distinction is the consent argument. And I'm saying that from Griffith's perspective, he acted on their consent, so he did not do anything wrong. Does that make sense?
No, because you're talking about different contexts.
It doesn't.
One of them is in war and battle. They're paid to fight in a war. They didn't get paid. They didn't sign up to get
made by human weapons. Like none of these fantasy elements. Like the only fantasy element that they ever saw was Zod and that Viad, whatever the rapist guy.
Okay, but you're making a distinction without a difference there. Like, what does it matter that they're being eaten by demons versus being hacked to pieces by swords?
What
about the context? What about the context makes it so that Griffith did evil in the Eclipse? The fact that they were eaten by demons as opposed to being hacked to pieces by swords and skewered by spears. What's the difference there?
Whoa.
Completely sold out to be reborn as this
You think
demigod.
There's no difference between fighting on the battlefield that you signed up for and then suddenly being in a demon realm and being eaten by demons?
Because of the consent that was given by the manipulator.
And I would say that is part of the thematic point of the Eclipse, is that the Hawks never cared about the consent of anyone that they murdered. And wait. What
does that mean? What does that mean?
It's a massive tangential point, which will be another video in the coming future about the hypocrisy of the Hawks and the Eclipse basically being a representation of the coercive nature of the battlefield, essentially. But you just said the difference between the battlefield and the Eclipse is that the Hawks chose to join the battlefield. You proved my point. And Griffith acted on the idea that the Hawks would consent to be sacrificed after the fact.
Yeah, and he's wrong.
I'm not saying that they actually did. Yes, I know. But the point is, in that case, the God Hand are at fault for manipulating Griffith. They are the willing agent of evil. Because they lied about it while knowing that the Hawks wouldn't actually consent to be sacrificed.
Lied about...
Griffith acted...
Wait a second. What did they lie about?
They lied about the Hawks forgiving him for being sacrificed in the afterlife. So after the fact, once they realized Griffith's reason.
That's after the fact. That's like, hey, they're okay with getting eaten by demons. They were like, really? Are they?
I mean, they may not be in the moment, but after the fact, once they realize his reasoning, they'll be like, "Oh, okay, that was okay then." I feel like that's totally reasonable.
No,
even if they are now crushed by this. I'm not saying they actually would. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that that's what the God Hands claimed. Griffith acted on their consent, therefore he did nothing wrong in the Eclipse.
So
The God Hand are at fault for manufacturing that consent, and that's what led to their deaths.
Okay, I don't think like this is leading anywhere. So, do you think like Griffith ends after he accepted the offer, and like there's only Femto afterwards?
I believe that Griffith lost his empathy and human
No,
compassion. He
as in
lost
like Griffith as like he was, like Griffith the
Griffith as he
character
was,
is like
yes.
is completely different after the transformation.
No, he's not completely different. He still has his memories,
Well,
and he still
no,
possesses.
as in like he's like a different character, isn't he?
No. The reason I distinguish between Femto and human Griffith is because people use the actions of Femto to inform their analysis of human Griffith, to say that he was always that evil and sociopathic. That's the reason.
I'm meaning
I
to ask
distinguish.
because like in later chapters, there's a moment when he, well, I don't know how much did you read of the manga? Like how far did you get?
I'm like 10 chapters. The last chapter I read was a couple of chapters after Griffith sheds his tear.
So it's like
the Elf Island,
somewhat
yeah.
some of the latest ones, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you remember like the chapter when Guts finally finds the armor and like he dons the thing?
Vaguely, maybe?
Okay, like there's an old witch in the magical forest that the demons finally invaded, and then the entire tree is on fire, and then Zod appears, and the gods ask him that like, hey, whose orders are these? And then he just says like, yeah, the only master of the Inhumans, Griffith. So why would Griffith order the execution? Like, why would Griffith burn someone alive?
Yeah, this is a problem with my initial video that I must admit. I didn't explicitly point out that when I used the name Femto, I was also referring to post-transformation Griffith.
Okay, that's why
the transformation.
The
transformation caused him to lose his human compassion, and of course, regardless of what form he was in after that point, he still lacked that. He was still the same character, basically. But yeah,
I thought that was like perfectly in line with the character that like he was displaying in the Golden Age, like when he set flames on the Queen and all
but the Queen had done something wrong. The Queen had tried to murder him beforehand.
Well, hold up.
Oh, sure,
hold up. In that scenario, he had no idea the Queen was doing anything. He planned to
That's not true.
He planned to kill the Queen a week before any of the events at the ball.
No. That's not true at all.
He blackmailed the Foss.
Yeah, he did because
that's how he got the info before.
No, what he sent to Foss was a letter. It was a contract that the Queen had signed with Foss saying we're going to plan to kill Griffith. Griffith sent the Count that letter that he had stolen from Foss to prove that he knew about the plan to poison him. Griffith only acted once he got that documentation proving that the Queen was about to murder him.
Well, this is from.
So it was 100% self-defense.
This is from chapter 32. He had no idea that the Queen was doing it, and he was planning to kill the Queen and her group.
I'm sure that's not what he said.
He's talking to Foss.
He said the first bit, but I'm sure he didn't say he was planning to kill the Queen and her group before he got out. I'm sure he didn't say that, because once he had the suspicion, he then went out of his way to get that documentation from Fox to prove it, because he needed that proof to be able to feel justified in going through with that, right?
It took the captors a week to scope out the schedule of Foss's daughter, so that means at least a week was planned in advance. So, and he says to Foss,
"Okay, but
I had no idea that the Queen was trying to poison me."
Until he found that documentation, the blood oath he confiscated.
Right. So he planned this out before the Queen was going to do anything.
Okay, but what's the timeline of when the Queen plans to do it? What's the timeline of Griffith?
Exactly. I don't think they mentioned.
Well, you don't know, so you're acting as if he planned to kill the Queen, and then the day before the fire, got his proof or she decided to actually do it. He had his suspicion based on the way Foss was acting. He then, and in fact, the scene where Griffith got suspicious of Foss was the scene from like way before, back just after Julius died. He gave him these weird eyes, and he was like, from that point on, he started doing some digging, Griffith did, because he was like, Foss is definitely out to murder me. And that's where he found the conspiracy to kill him.
Right.
That's where he got the inkling.
The thing is that this was happening well before. Like, this was all planned before. Like, he was aware of Foss and his supposed schemes, or at least his insight, because he could look at him and see that, oh, your eyes tell me you are afraid of me, which means you either want to kill me or erase me or be subordinate to me. So
yes, but the fact remains that he required that documentation to be able to go through with it. Just because he was stalking Foss's routes as to where he traveled doesn't necessarily indicate that he was planning to kill the queen. I mean, he was suspicious of Foss for months, so of course he was spying on his movements. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just don't see that.
It's very
connection.
clear. The point of that blood oath documentation was to say that Griffith needed proof to be able to kill the queen. Throughout the entire Golden Age arc, the only people that he kills intentionally are people that have already tried to murder him. I mean, people bring this up all the time. Evidence of Griffith's sociopathy and how awful of a person he was. They say that, of course, Griffith was always like Femto. Look at all the horrible things he did. He assassinated Julius. He burned the queen alive. And it's like, these people all tried to murder him first. Griffith only assassinated Julius after getting proof of the poisoned arrow that had been shot at him, and he only assassinated the queen after he got written documentation that she was going to murder him. He only set the place on fire after he got poisoned. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know the timeline for when the queen did that whole documentation.
Yeah, okay, well, we might as well move on then.
Yeah, but they were doing things well in advance, I know that.
Yeah.
All right. I think we sort of messed up our order here for the video, but that's fine.
Yeah, we went a bit over the place myself, yeah.
I don't even know if we need to go over the video. I mean, I feel like we're doing a good job of going over things.
Yes.
Right here.
We can. I think we can go straight to the rape or like the Femto argument.
Okay. I mean, do you guys agree that Griffith lost his empathy in the transformation? Do you guys agree with that? You don't really understand what I mean by Griffith and Femto being different, do you?
I still believe that like this is a headcanon that like he has this empathy. It's more like pity that like he was feeling towards that kid. And I think like it's like a bit of a mistake from Miro to do that scene. But I always saw it like that was like his last bit of like humanity. That like he was just like very young. But we have been over this point already. Like he quite certainly like lost his humanity when he turned to that God hand figure. But ultimately, he made the choice. I'm still standing by that point.
The choice doesn't matter because it was not informed. You have to care about informed
Yes,
consent.
we have gone through that like half an hour now.
If you don't care about informed consent, I don't know what to tell you.
No, he chose to kill people. Okay, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
if he
but
was
a child can choose to have sex with an adult. That doesn't necessarily
he is an adult.
mean
He is an adult in the Eclipse. Like, how old is he? 22 or 23?
Yeah, this is another point I would say is that part of the reason why a child can't consent to a lot of things with an adult is because there is a power dynamic in terms of the understanding of sex and all that sort of stuff. Does this play
into this right now?
Well, I'll
is this about the lake scene or the Eclipse?
No. In the Eclipse. And I would say that the power dynamic between the God Hand and Griffith is more extreme, more severe, more coercive than that between an adult and an unknowing minor. Let me defend that point really quick. Griffith is a suicidal, emaciated a suicidal, emaciated man in a hallucinogenic state being confronted with beings and concepts beyond his comprehension. The God Hand are seemingly omniscient, eldritch beings who would been shown to be able to read minds. That dynamic in terms of informed knowledge, and just that power dynamic in general is so wide that that you can't argue that his choice was informed or that he consented, because the accepting party and the offering party weren't standing on equal footing, so it's too coercive to be considered valid.
They're not coercing
Why is that irrelevant?
They're not coercing him into doing anything. They're saying, look,
They did coerce.
look at this crazy illusion I'm giving you, and all the choices you made led up to here. Because at the end,
I did actually get a response video saying this. The God Hand never coerced Griffith because the definition of coercion is threatening death. And the God Hand did threaten death. In chapter 77, they tell him that if he does not pile up the corpses, he himself will become a corpse.
And he put
that
the value of his life higher than the value of his men.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did. If it's death,
oh, he didn't, because he acted on what he perceived to be the Hawks' consent.
His death is more important than the lives of his men, so he wanted to live.
Okay, Patrick Bateman didn't do any of those murders. Like, he just thought, like, the point of, like, his not liking Huey Lewis and the news is, like, too much. Either way, at the end, right before he actually says, I offer them all, or I sacrifice. He says, out of all the thousands of comrades and tens of thousands of enemies, only one, you and you alone, you made me forget my dream. And he was talking about Guts.
Hey, how's that relevant?
That's a very clear statement. He's not hallucinogenic. He's not...
Okay, what's he saying there?
He's talking about his friend Guts, who just popped up out of nowhere. And he's like, hey, buddy, I'm going to sacrifice you all.
Yeah, so that is the moment where he finally reaches the epiphany that he always did care about Guts, and that he'd been lying to himself that entire time.
And he's going to kill him.
The last expression on his face is melancholic. It's not that of spite or hatred.
Exactly.
He knows he's going to kill him. But here's the thing as well.
Thank you.
In the previous chapter, the God Hand show an out-of-context memory of Guts saying, hey, it's okay to do what you're doing right now because that's for your dream. So they're manufacturing Guts' consent as well.
That is a reference, not a direct reference, but the chapter 32 with Guts is talking about the end.
Yes, I know. And they put it out of context.
It's the
because
same
they know
message.
that Griffith values what Guts thinks.
It's the same message that he gave in the chapter 32.
Yes, but the point is...
So did they lie to him?
Ain't this part of the path to your dream?
Yes,
you believe that, don't you? Yeah,
yes.
That's the one, yeah.
Yes, but the point is they are using Guts' words because they know that Griffith still cares about what Guts thinks and what Guts believes in.
Yeah, that's why Griffith is a great character, because, like, he isn't completely, like... He still had, like, some feelings for Guts. Yeah.
But again, it doesn't matter that he killed them in and of itself, because he was led to believe that they would forgive him.
No,
and that
you're putting way too much onus on that one paragraph by Slan. Okay?
It's very important.
Yeah, but so is the rest of it. So is the rest of it.
The rest of it doesn't contradict that. That's the last thing they say to Griffith before he goes through.
Why doesn't it contradict it?
Because it doesn't. Saying you should sacrifice these people doesn't contradict his reasoning for doing that.
Well, she's adding on top of, well, if you kill these people, they're going to forgive you. That's something new. That's new information.
Okay, so we know that he did care about their consent. They wouldn't have bothered bringing it up.
That could give him a little warm, fuzzy feeling. Oh, they care about me. Oh, they're going to forgive me if I kill them. Isn't that cute? Or he's completely blitzed and he has no idea what the hell she's saying. He's like, oh, that's great. They're going to make me feel good after I become whatever. So no, all the data matters to what the Godhead is saying, and for the most part,
none of the data contradicts the fact that they did manufacture the Hawks' consent, and the Hawks' consent is the distinguishing factor.
This is getting a little silly. Consent to what? To kill people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, consent to be sacrificed so that Griffith can then go on to achieve his dream, to ensure that their efforts weren't for nothing.
Yes,
Again, I go back to the lake scene.
That's great.
Yes.
I don't care how great they sell the idea of becoming a god or this or that, he still sacrifices. He knows the cost. He's like, oh, I just have to kill my men. Great.
At that point, you have to go back to the mens rea. I know that you
I don't
talked
care
about
about
that in
mens
your
rea.
last video.
I don't care
Well, you
about
did in your last video. You did in the
we're
response
not-
video.
Well, right now, this is not a law issue, right? We're just talking about
It's not a law issue. It's a morality issue.
mens rea and actus
A lot of
reus
law
is a
based-
law issue.
Yes, but a lot of law is based on moral principles. Griffith requires the criminal intent.
No, he doesn't.
The selfish. Yes, he does.
No, he
The
doesn't. Why does
selfish-
he need criminal intent to choose?
If we're going to make the normative statement that Griffith was selfish
Under which law?
in sacrificing, I'm not making the legal argument.
Then why are
I'm
you
making
using
the
a legal
moral
term?
argument? That's what because law is based on morality. I'm using legal examples in practice to substantiate my moral arguments. It's like me talking about the moral concept of voluntary inhibition by using the legal example. I'm just using an example to show how it. I'm still making the moral argument.
Yeah, but this is an insight into his mind, and gods are showing him what it is he's been doing with his life. In the context of, let's say, the chapter 32 or other chapters saying, this is your dream, you should follow it. That's great. You should follow your dream. By the way, your dream costs all these people to ritualistically kill them so you could become a god. This is kind of like Mura going, you know what, the story has been going pretty well for Band of the Hawk. They've been getting bigger and bigger and better. And there's one little hiccup. Everything falls apart. They lose 80% of their men over the course of a year because Griffith is all hung up and they don't know what to do. I'm assuming he cared about all their dreams that, the people who left or died during that 1 year he was tied up. And all of a sudden he's like, hey, you want to get supercharged? You want to become awesome again? He's like, okay, what do I have to do? Kill these people.
But it's okay because they'll be okay with it. It's no different from how it's always been. The Hawks have always.
It is very different. The context is very different.
I know, but that's what the God Hand is telling him. I know that the actual context is different. I'm talking about from Griffith's perspective, his motivation. That it's how it's always been. The Hawks have always been willing to risk their lives for Griffith and his dream.
His dream has never changed. His motivation has never changed.
Okay, yeah, I know. He's always been motivated by empathetic guilt.
No. He's always motivated for his dream. He wants to have a kingdom.
And the reason he wants to achieve that dream so strongly is because so many people have invested themselves into it.
There's no evidence of that. I know you made a mention of him having some sort of utopia or some sort of workers' paradise. I don't know what the hell the term was he used. Where is that in the video? I can't remember. It was for people. Does he actually use the term like he wants people?
Sunk cost fallacy is him saying, but if for their sakes, for the sake of the dead, if there is something I can do, that thing is to win.
Yeah.
I'll keep winning to fulfill my dream to which they clung, putting their lives on the line.
It's kind of sad to win when they're all dead. It doesn't quite make too much logic there.
Okay, but the God Hand alluded to the fact that there was an afterlife. They said that they'd forgive him after being sacrificed. So there is an experience after death,
that's
meaning that death isn't the end.
That's a very minor point to hang on to.
You just brought it up. It's a thing that happened.
You brought up the afterlife. That's a very minor
in the manga. In the manga.
Yeah, it's in the manga. I know.
They have a lived. They continue to experience after death. Well, you said that if they're already dead, then what does it matter if he achieved his dream? The fact is that they exist in the afterlife.
If he cares so much about these people to give them their dream, which is to achieve the kingdom with him, killing them eliminates that thing that they're trying to get, isn't it?
No, because it still means that there is no longer that their efforts have been brought into fruition.
Yeah, but they don't get that. They don't get to achieve that dream. They're gone.
Yes, I know, and he says that in the lake scene. He says, "If I know they're dead now, but if there is one thing I can do for them, for the sake of the dead, it is to win for their memory."
Okay.
And once they're in the afterlife, they will forgive Griffith,
That-
welcome him
That
warmly.
is,
They'll
that
realize,
is an
oh, you did
argument
that for us.
towards those who have already passed, not to the ones who are alive. You see? Yeah, that's true.
Yes, but
The people who are still alive are still alive.
okay, but there's no way for their dreams to come into fruition if he said no to this. Their dreams aren't coming into fruition either way. The better alternative
So he chose a worse path, you're saying?
in the Eclipse. No,
Yes, he did. He just killed them.
well, no.
Their dreams are dead.
Griffith had the choice to either die and the Hawks' dreams were dead, or live and the Hawks' dreams were dead, but their efforts were still kind of meaningful in that Griffith's kingdom.
What do you mean
was
meaningful?
attained.
Like, what does
The dead
Griffith
men,
achieve after
dead
the
men
eclipse?
have great meaning in their
Okay,
lives.
but then his personality was changed. So
Okay, wait, let's get to that.
Yeah.
Where is his personality change? Where are you getting that?
personality changes when he transforms. I'll go right through it now.
Okay.
There seems to have been some confusion as to what I actually meant by Femto and Griffith being different people. You can tell I'm reading from a document.
Okay.
You
Go
seem
ahead.
to have got this idea in your head that I was saying that Griffith has some sort of split personality where two distinct entities exist inside his head at once and vie for control. I'm guessing that you got this idea based on characters from other media, but I never even slightly suggested this. Maybe the problem was that I used the name Femto to refer to post-transformation Griffith as a whole, but I don't know. All I ever said was that Griffith had his ability to feel effective empathy and human compassion taken away from him by the transformation. Not all of his emotions, just his positive, light humanity. Think of it like this. Imagine there was a guy called Jim, who was the kindest, most empathetic person in the world, who would never hurt a fly. And then he has an accident that causes a traumatic brain injury, which causes him to lose his ability to feel effective empathy and human compassion. He then goes on to do some real greaseball shit. My point is to say that the actions of Jim post-head injury in no way reflect on his character from before that happened.
So you're saying
And those
that
actions can't be used as evidence that Jim was always that evil and sociopathic.
so Griffith
and always had it.
some bad thing happened to him where his brain changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Do
becoming
you want
Femto
me
was
to
a-
go through that?
No. You're making the guess that becoming Femto causes his brain to change.
Not a guess. It's 100% canon. It's explained by the God Hand.
That his brain has changed.
Well, you can't... See, this is the thing you did in your last video. Real-life psychology, fictional, magical transformation, which I found to be kind of weird.
Well, we need a basis of understanding the magical system of that Mura puts together. You can't just say
You're kind of basing all your empathy arguments on reality. So it's can we
No, I'm
use
not.
psychology
I'm
part for
basing
that?
I'm basing it on how Griffith acted.
Yeah, if you're saying
Oh,
Femto is
okay.
evil, right, or bad or whatever, he's lost his empathy. Usually that's a result of some sort of dramatic occurrence, like a bad thing. Like you don't go from let's say rags to riches because he's like an emaciated skeleton and he turns into this, I don't know, caped superhuman, whatever that is. So you don't go from good to bad, or sorry, from bad to good or bad to healthier and you become evil, right? That's not how that works. It's the opposite.
I know that's true. And
Okay,
a lot of people make the argument that when Griffith's personality changed in the transformation, natural character, and he just decided that he didn't care. And I find that ridiculous.
Well,
Normal people don't just do a complete 180 like that unless there is some magical transformation taking.
right, that we see
So,
that
and that is what happened.
we see that later on.
He
in,
was still human when he made the choice.
right, obviously.
Oh, what did he choose?
He chose to sacrifice all his men.
Okay, but what did he choose to become?
His true self, Femto.
Well, you're making the argument right now that Griffith chose to lose his empathy, and that is why he's
Yes.
empathy, right? Okay, so if you want to prove this, you need to point out specifically where the God Hand told him that by saying yes to the sacrifice, he would lose his human compassion.
This
What
is under
if
this.
he-
Wait,
if
wait,
he
wait.
Doesn't
chose-
matter. Like they told him that like sacrifice them. Okay, they're gonna die. He knows that they're gonna die. and then they lied to him, and he accepted it, even though he has been living the life that he did. Constant manipulators, politicians, all of that. And he just went with that? How?
Yeah, the better answer is that, or the simpler answer is, he's always been this way and he hasn't realized it yet. And it takes this I don't know, magical God people to say, listen, this is what you are. You've always killed people. You've always got them killed for you, and they've killed people for you. You manipulate. You get what you want. You flip out when you don't get what you want. Kind of sounding like a narcissist right now, if we can go through the list, but we don't have to. Hey, I'm going to supercharge you to do all the things you've always wanted to do, and then some.
These magical super God people do not tell him that this is how he's always been.
Yes, they
do.
They
tell him in the transformation.
Yes, they do.
Tell him in the.
Yes.
They tell him in the.
Yes.
They tell him.
No.
They tell him.
No, they don't.
They tell him.
Look at the illusion. Look at the illusion. They say, I can, the entire description with the old lady. She's constantly saying, you did this. This is you.
Yes, because she's playing on his empathetic guilt.
I don't care whether he's empathetic or not. This is his
but we're
actions.
talking about a loss of human compassion.
We're talking about transforming into a God creature. I don't care about his emotional state. I don't care about his mental state.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about him losing his compassion. That's what we're talking about.
You are under the assumption he has compassion. Let's assume he doesn't, okay? Let's assume he has zero emotion. We don't know what's in his mind. It's all one big mask, okay? He's making a mask. He puts another one on. He cuts his arms. He puts another one on. It's all a game to him. He's very manipulative, okay? We don't know what's inside him. Anyone who looks at Griffith, even Casca, has no idea if he's depressed. When Foss looks at him, he thought Foss, what did Foss think when he first saw him? That he had no idea about the death of Adonis. And it turns out he did. He was so stoic and freaking, well, not stoic. Usually we relate that to narcissism, personality disorder, where they don't feel anything. And he read him wrong. Minister Foss, the guy who's like the master of whatever his job is. He deals with people all the time. So let's assume there's whatever mental state, we have no clue. Okay? And then the gods come in and they snap their fingers and say, hey, guys, let's look at your mind. Oh, look, you're a psychopath. You did this. You killed all these people to get your dream.
If I acted under the assumption that Griffith never had any compassion, then I'd be really confused when I got to the scene of the idea of evil telling him that his compassion has just died from the effect of the transformation. How can he lose something that he never had? That doesn't really make any
I think
sense.
you're overblowing the humanity aspect of Griffith. I'm sure he's got human capacities. I'm sure he does.
No,
not in the way
he
you
acted
think.
on
though.
that empathetic guilt. He acted based on his humanity.
You cannot base that on him cutting his arms. Because in
not.
that scene, he says, "This is nothing. This does not mean anything to me. This kid didn't mean anything. I've gone through hundreds of soldiers."
The very last thing he says is acknowledging that he did care about Guts. The thematic climax of his arc is finally acknowledging and embodying his emotionality.
What he says is, out of all the thousands of comrades and tens of thousands of enemies, only one, you and you alone, you made me forget my dream. Now, you could interpret that any way you like. You could interpret that to mean all kinds of things. Now, we know that from his definition of a friend, that Guts was his friend. He put friend on a higher level than comrade. Because comrade was all of his soldiers, and they died off, right? We don't know if he cared about them. We don't know if he made that up. We're not sure. It doesn't really matter. But Guts was his friend. He was the equal he was seeking for. And that was the whole speech at the top of the fountain during was it the party? I can't remember whatever the scene was.
The party.
Yeah. And Guts and Casca are like, oh my God. And I don't know if they actually heard it. I assume they heard what he was saying because it looked very far away.
They definitely heard that speech.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest impacts Guts got.
Yeah, and he goes, oh, that's what a friend is. I'm going to go do that. And he does that. And he goes and decides to find his own path and leave Griffith. And even Griffith is like, even if that person is me, I would go against them. And he's kind of getting what he wants in that regard. And it's kind of shocking. I think it's like give the character or give the protagonist what they want. You know, it's always one of those classic elements of a story to like if they're scared of snakes, the next scene you better show some snakes or something like that. Like that sort of
What's
idea.
that got to do with a lack of compassion?
In regards to what?
What we're talking about.
The fact that
Whether Griffith lost his
because
compassion in the
you're making this
transformation.
assumption that he has compassion in this grandiose concept, and I never understood what that means. Why do you think compassion, like towards his men he's never really known, the thousands of men it would be impossible to know over the course of how many battles and wars he fought, to know all of their dreams and feelings? I don't know if you've met too many military guys. I've met a few. They have a very tight group. I mean, the words of comrade means a little different to some of my Russian friends. That means above, like stranger and friend and family. It's a very unique word. It's different with Griffith, though. Griffith says it's just the people I work with, whereas friend is above all of that.
Listen, we've already been through this with the lake scene. He talked about hundreds and thousands of people dying for him and how bad he felt about that. And the way that it's framed is that it is a moment where Casca sees his true self before he slips back behind the mask. We know, it's not an assumption, we know that is what he feels. Because you're not that empathetic.
But what if he was just manipulating Casca into believing this? So like Casca can spread this image.
Then why did he say, "Don't worry, it was nothing"?
Because that's
why did
the truth.
Try to...
Because that's not a mask.
Well, then he's not manipulating Casca.
He's
So you're
always
saying
lying.
Wait.
he is at once manipulating Casca into believing that he does care about his men, while also manipulating Casca.
Yes, sociopaths do that. They pretend to be urged by something that, like, oh, I can't overcome this, but like maybe you can help me. Like then they manipulate people into believing those things. Yes.
You just made two contradictory statements. You said that at once he is trying to convince Casca that it was all for the money, all for the logic, but he is also trying to convince her that it's all about his men.
No, it's hypothetically. Like, how do you know that, like, he's sincere in that moment? There's no assurance compared to like all the other scenes.
This is a classic argument that the Greeks have always asked. How do you know when a liar is lying? Now, unless you know some element of, I don't know, conversational ethics, where you can like look at a person's eyes and see their galvanic skin response, all these factors in, you might be able to figure out that way. But when you're talking about sociopaths, they are designed to manipulate and get something that they want, and they'll do whatever it takes.
So what is the manipulation in that scene then, from your perspective?
Well,
what is it?
He was caught by Casca by sleeping with Genin, right? He knows that. She knows that. She comes by. Right. What is the first thing he say? Oh, it feels so nice. Why don't you join me? Well, you think I'm gross or dirty or disgusting or whatever it was, because he knows what she saw. So he's trying to go, okay, let me play this up. How can I get her on my side? Because we know she likes him. So he's going to get some low-hanging fruit. How do we get Casca to like him again or more? I'm going to play the victim. I'm going to feel and look so this goes back to empathy, or your idea of empathy. Who is so empathetic they hurt themselves? Is it someone who cares so much? No. It's someone who is super depressed and sad and wants to end it. If they're going to dig their fingernails into their triceps and scratch, that is a lot of effort to do that. Instead, he's putting on a show. He wants her comfort. He wants her to appeal to his emotions. Oh, she's going to like me more. So I'm going
to... the other thing that like this supports, I'm sorry to interrupt, Smud, but because right after that, like he barely cares about Casca. Like there's... like a few moments, like the one when he sends reinforcements to save Guts and her, but like these can be interpreted as a strategic moment, because if you lose Guts and Casca, like one of the two best soldiers he has in the army, who's gonna command them? The rest, or do the killing? Like Guts definitely has like the highest kill count in that group, but even afterwards, like during like the fever dream he has before initiating Eclipse, like the only reason he's envisioning that like Casca is the only one that's taking care of him is that like because like that was like initially like what he was envisioning, that like if I accept like this kind of life, then I'm just a cripple and Casca is just taking care of me. That's how he saw it.
This is, we judge people not by what they say or how they talk. I mean, we could understand their character a bit. We judge them by their actions. And I want to stress this.
That's my argument.
Yeah, and I want to stress this. He is a classic narcissist. Now, you don't have to read the DSM-5 to figure that out, but if you want, you can go right ahead.
We can get into that because I actually wrote a whole section on that. But let's go based on what you have claimed, that Griffith is manipulating Casca to try and by putting on this show of being vulnerable and sad to try and manipulate her for whatever reason. If that's the case, why for the first half of the scene does he outright deny that he feels anything? Why does he then at the end of the scene try and tell her to forget about that?
Because he's trying to feed her mind into like these ideas that like, oh, I'm troubled. I can be endangered by these emotions that I have.
Wow, real 5D chess from Griffith. Why?
Yes.
If that's the case, if Griffith's manipulation of Casca manifests as him trying to get her to think that he is a vulnerable, why in every other scene in the Golden Age arc basically is he trying to claim the opposite to characters? Why in the dream speech is he trying to claim that he doesn't give a shit about
bullshit.
his men?
Like he's just the typical scumbag he is. Like he's just like trying to like half truths is like he's spreading. Like maybe some of those are his ideas, but ultimately he just wants the pussy. He just wants Charlotte because like that's the way to the kingdom. It doesn't matter like what he says there because like it's all just to manipulate this person into believing that. Like
that's kind of the only
that like
evidence.
Guts will listen to that speech and like have those things unfold. No, that was probably just a mistake by him. That like
so if you know that he was bullshitting in that speech, then what evidence do you have to suggest that he only viewed and isn't that compassionate? Because that's the main thing people latch on to. How can Griffith's manipulation be trying to show his vulnerability, his vulnerable side? If
because that's what
the start of
do.
his relationship with Guts, but then why at the start of his relationship with Guts did he outright deny caring about Guts or any of his men in any capacity at every single moment that is brought up?
Well, why did he let Guts join his team? Because when Guts killed one of his teammates, I think, or one of his
three of them, I think.
Because Griffith liked Guts and because Guts treated Griffith as an equal, and it was an escape from the heavy burden of having to be around people that basically viewed him as a mistake and
so he
looked
sees,
up to him.
So he sees Guts as
deeply
valuable.
wanted as an equal friend. But what he claims
not yet.
is that he
not yet. No, that's too early. He doesn't seem as a friend.
Let's go to the start. Let's go to the start. In that scene, he claims that Guts belongs to him. When Griffith saves Guts at the rear guard, he saves Guts is in a sticky situation. Griffith rides to the rear guard and saves Guts, almost dying in the process. Griffith tells Guts, the reason I did that was because you were a valuable soldier to me. You're a valuable, useful tool for me getting my own kingdom. That is what he wants Guts to think. He wants Guts to think that he doesn't care about him, that he only views him as a tool. But then 3 years later, when he risks his life to save Zod again, he risked his life to save Guts from Zod. This time when Guts asks, he's entirely unwilling to say that. He says, Guts, do I even need a reason? Stop bothering me. He's unwilling to tell Guts the same thing that he did before because he genuinely cares about him, but he's still unwilling to acknowledge the fact that he cares. He's kind of in this middle space where he doesn't want to acknowledge
it's like he doesn't care.
Real feelings.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't care.
If he didn't care, why didn't he say the same thing he said a year ago?
Because he still doesn't care. Like I don't see why he has to explain himself.
No, but if he didn't care,
yeah.
Then why is this parallel being brought up? In the first place.
Why does he save Casca as well when she gets stuck? Because Casca and Guts are his two biggest pawns. They're two biggest people to use.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you're going to claim that when he saves Guts and Casca, he is doing so by calculating what was most valuable to his dream in that moment. Surely the most valuable thing would be to preserve his own life. Why would he ever risk his life for a tool that is only useful to him if he is alive and able to use that tool to attain his kingdom?
The same reason he
Casca
slept with
says-
Because he's a master strategist and manipulator. That's why.
Oh my
But
God.
like
Everyone-
the strategy is playing into
Yeah,
this.
everyone who comes across Griffith is either dead, is entranced by him. He's always one step ahead of the aristocracy, as we saw with Julius. It's only that one time when he gets a friend and he loses it that his scheming is not quite clear. He shows up at Charlotte's windowsill, and
Yep.
he's like, "Okay, hey, how's it going?" Blah blah blah, and oh yeah, you're right, I probably shouldn't be here. And he just starts grabbing her. You're like, "Oh, this is not going to end well," because he knows it's not going to end well. She knows it's not going to end well, and
period.
Period.
Yes.
Indeed.
Casca says this herself. She says that Griffith is usually calm and calculated, except with Guts. She says that Guts changed him, and she said that it was really odd that Griffith would risk his life in that way. Griffith doesn't objectively value Guts' use to the Hawks as a tool, because Griffith has an incredibly off-base understanding of Guts' actual strategic value. Excuse me.
So
he lets Guts on the front lines while knowing that he's a reckless hothead that almost gets himself and the raiders killed all of the time. And he sent fucking Guts on a stealth mission to assassinate Julius. And we all know how that one panned out.
it worked.
Griffith is emotions first when it comes to
Successful.
Guts. He is biased towards him, and it clouds his strategic judgment.
Wait a second. If he's
This isn't the
biased,
case anywhere else.
if he's biased, why do you put him on the front lines?
No, the point is, what do you mean? Yes, he's biased towards him emotionally. He
Well,
likes
then why
him.
do you put him on the front lines knowing he could die?
What?
If he's
Because
biased,
he has a bloated sense. He has this bloated confidence in Guts' ability to survive and do stuff well. That's why he
Okay.
sent him on that stealth mission.
so he knows
Yeah.
what Guts
So
can
the
do.
point of this, no, he clearly doesn't. Because why would you send Guts on a stealth mission?
because
The most clumsy, the least stealthy person in his entire army.
Guts will do it,
That-
and he's going to do it well.
All of his soldiers would. You think Judah would have refused to do that?
I don't think that's relevant whether who he chose. He chose the best guy, which is Guts.
No, but he didn't choose the best guy. The best guy would have been Judo. He's the stealth guy. The whole point of that scene is to show that
He's stupid?
Guts.
Or
No, yes, to say that he doesn't objectively value Guts based on his strategic value alone.
I think
in fact,
he puts
you-
Guts above
in-
everyone else. I really do.
Do you know what? Do you know what proves completely that you're wrong on this point
Okay,
and how you've contradicted yourself?
Why?
sure.
The very last thing Guts says, Griffith says, is that Guts is the only one who made him forget his dream.
So what?
So how can he be valuing Guts on his use as a tool?
That could be
if
there
Guts
could
is
be
making him forget
numerous
his
reasons
dream.
why he forgot a dream. He said he's never had a friend before, and that's his only friend. If you have a thing you've never had before, you might forget other things. You might have other priorities that get contradicted or pushed aside. That's totally normal. So I don't see how that contradicts the definition of a friend and his value of Guts as numero uno in his army.
Okay, so that proves that in certain instances when he's talking about Guts and his relationship and his feelings towards Guts, when he claims that he only views him as a pawn, he is lying to himself.
So
There is no truth to that.
So he is a pawn
He is
or not a pawn? Which one is he?
He's not a pawn. He convinces himself that he's a pawn.
Yeah,
but his
he is a pawn
actions
originally, and then he
his
becomes his
actions
friend,
contradict.
right? And then we see him.
No. Because again, why would Griffith risk his life for a guy who'd only been in the band for days
Because he's a
if
really
he
good
was just a
fighter.
pawn to him?
Because at that point, he's a really good
That's
fighter.
ridiculous.
That's not ridiculous. He's a really good fighter.
Casca has a monologue saying, "This is really weird. Why is Griffith acting that way?" has never acted this way.
Yeah, it seems like he really. Yeah, because it seems like Griffith knows the battle capabilities of Guts.
But we've clearly established that he doesn't.
Well, why else is he going after him?
Where did we establish that?
Well, he's going after him because he likes him beyond his strategic value to the Hawks. He literally risks his entire life, his kingdom, his dream for this guy that he only met a couple of days.
When you
that is not
when you have goals like that, you're gonna risk your life. You're gonna put your life on the line.
Not for such a stranger.
No.
Not for someone.
He's not a stranger. Like he just saw him single-handedly kill that armored guy that was like 3 times his size with just like a long-ass sword. He caught up that like, I'm gonna send like some of my elite men after you just for fun.
Yeah,
like, Kokus was probably doing that.
Yeah, in regards to sending him on missions, he sent them on 3 missions in terms of assassination, and they were all successful. So clearly he's good at his job, and I don't see anything wrong.
Guts was good at his job when he did the Julius mission.
Yeah.
Yes, he was more than successful. He got more than he wanted.
So what?
Yes.
So what?
That was like another thing that was in front of Griffith.
Yeah.
That's why he was having that psychopathic smile on his face.
When Guts got injured by accident, and then he had to cover his wounds, and
Guts
then
gets injured by all kinds of things.
He gets injured. No. He wasn't stealthy. He set off the alarm, and then he got an arrow stuck in his shoulder. And when Foss saw that, it made him think, oh, he must have been the guy who assassinated Julius. Guts is a really bad guy at stealth. He's really bad, and he killed.
Where do you get that scene? Where was that in the manga?
I don't remember the specific chapter, but I know it.
I don't remember that part when Foss saw that.
I do.
Well, maybe it happened. I don't recall that. But either way, he trusts Guts to do the job. Guts does the job, and he does the job.
Earlier on, you literally admitted that Guts was the only one who he didn't view as a tool. You said that, and now you're saying
later on he sees him as a friend. Initially, he's the best soldier he's got. Okay, it's very simple. He gets this guy who's killed some of his men. Hey, dude, I got a dream. Follow me. Blah blah blah. Let's have a fight. He beats Guts. Okay, now you're mine. And now he's his best unit to the point of him being promoted to captain, or what is he?
No, because even 3 years later, after he fights with Zod, and they're friends, and he values him, even then he's unwilling to tell Guts that he cares about him.
I'm not seeing an issue with that. At that so point, what?
Exactly. So the point is, Griffith isn't willing to show his emotional side.
So what?
He is repressing his emotions.
No, he's not.
So what?
You're basing it off of a lack of evidence, on a negative. Because he's not showing emotion, he must have emotion. That's what you're saying.
But we've just had you just said yourself that Griffith does truly care about Guts, but he's not admitting it.
As a friend, sure.
Yes, as a friend, but he's not admitting that.
That doesn't mean he has to admit it. Why?
I didn't say he had to.
Well,
I'm saying that it's evidence that he does not acknowledge his emotions normally to other people. So when it does happen with Casca...
okay. So he sounds like...
We're just going in circles with this one.
Yeah, he sounds like a narcissist. He doesn't admit to weaknesses or this or that.
How does that...
Well, let me bring...
Emotional repression is not narcissism. What are you talking about?
Not having the emotion in the first place is narcissism.
Well, we've just agreed that he does feel those emotions.
He has a friend is not an emotion.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. It's a relationship. It's not an emotion. I could have a relationship with all different kinds of people and feel zip.
Okay. If you've acknowledged that Griffith viewed Guts as a friend at that point in the manga, why did Griffith say the opposite in his dream speech to Charlotte if it wasn't a lie?
What did he say?
He says a true friend must be someone who has his own reason beyond victory. He must have his own dream, and because Guts doesn't have that, he can't be my friend.
There you go.
That's what he says. Clearly,
so Guts doesn't know yet what that means. So
no. We're talking about Griffith.
Yeah, and Guts has no idea what Griffith means as a friend. Why would Griffith say, "Hey, Guts, you're my buddy"? Why would Griffith say that in the first place?
because it was prompted by Guts asking why he saved him. In that scenario, you usually say, "Well, because I care about you, Guts, because I value you as a person."
Or I value you
That's
because you're my soldier, because you've always been my soldier.
But he was unwilling to say that.
Who cares?
He was unwilling to say that,
So what?
like he did before. No, but you have to ask, why was he unwilling to say that?
Yes, but
this
you're
time
making
around?
the assumption
Remember,
he's got emotion to do so, or he needs to do that. There's no reason to do it. Why would he do that? Just because someone asked him a question? Who cares?
Yes.
Who cares?
Because it's part of the
Griffith, what's 2 + 2? I don't care.
Because it's
Guts, you're my favorite frying pan.
Yeah, what's the big deal?
If it was a scene in and of itself, your argument might make sense. But there has been a clear, intentional line, a comparison, a parallel to the first time he saved Guts, where he said, "You're a soldier to me." Miura is saying that 3 years later, Griffith no longer believes that, and he's no longer saying that.
Or Griffith
That's
doesn't
what
like
he's
repeating
saying.
himself, like he did when he went to have this last duel with him.
What, 3 years before?
After.
So why would Griffith write it into the story if the only saying is Griffith didn't want to repeat himself? What kind of thematic character writing is that?
It doesn't need to be
What's
thematic.
the point?
It doesn't need to be because
Why was it in the scene?
He was
Why
about to
it in the
leave the
story?
Band of the Hawk, and Griffith stops him, and he says, "You are mine. Your life is mine. If you want to leave, you have to speak to my sword," or words to that effect, right?
Yes, because
beats him down,
again, as I explained in my previous video, he momentarily readopts persona, back into that
That's
state
not a
of
persona.
emotional
That's
repression.
just a statement of fact. He's just saying, if you gotta leave, this is how you do it.
No, but we know that Griffith doesn't merely. Wait, what are you talking about? You're talking about the
duel.
way that Guts left.
Yeah, he's gonna leave, he's gonna walk out the door, and everyone's waiting for him right at the edge of wherever they are, and Griffith is there, and he's like, "Hey, you're not gonna let me go," or whatever, and Griffith's like, "Yeah, you're mine. You belong to me. If you want to leave, you have to do this," and they fight, and boom, he leaves.
And here's the thing: after Griffith saves Guts from Zod, Griffith doesn't want to say anymore that Guts belongs to him and he's a mere soldier.
At the point in
and
time when they have the duel, that's when Griffith goes, "Oh, this is my friend. He is doing his thing." That I remember the speech at the fountain with Charlotte. Maybe he's realizing that's his friend at that point. Either that, it hits him for reality.
No.
Why not? No. Why not? That's
it hits him, and then he has. Why does he have such a jerk reaction when he doesn't realize it's his friend? Because the first inner monologue we see him having is this cope that
no.
merely
You're
belongs
assuming his
to.
mental state. Again, we don't do this with characters.
I'm not. It's literally an inner monologue. You're assuming it. You just made the assumption. You just stated that in that moment Griffith saw Guts as a friend.
Yeah.
I'm saying no, he didn't, because in the first ever internal monologue we ever hear him say in that scene, Griffith is not acknowledging him as a friend. He's saying he belongs to me. He's a tool. He will never get out of my reach.
He's an object, exactly. And then the reality hits when he finally beats Griffith. He's actually, I don't know if you want to call that an equal or whatever. He's just better at the duel. And
no, because
but how can you say if he won't be mine, his life is forfeit? That so be it. I don't care. That's literally what he says in the manga.
Yeah,
I know it's what he says, but it doesn't fall in line with his characterization since the 3-year time.
That's what he thinks.
Yes, that may be what he consciously thinks. That may be his cope.
Wait.
But
Stop,
he then realized it later.
Don't say consciously think. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Obviously, if you're thinking, it's conscious, right? I'm not saying
it wasn't consciously informed about it.
Yeah, let's not
in the monologue.
Let's not delve into the unconscious mind, please.
Oh my God. Consciously thought.
Guts really wants apples, but instead he got swords. Oh, okay.
Clang.
Griffith admits to himself in the dungeon that he did actually acknowledge that Guts was a true friend, and he regretted how he treated Guts in the second duel, and he admits that was wrong.
Did he? All I could read in that chapter is that he's the only thing that keeps him alive, because like there's no other enemy that like keeps him like that. Like
There's
yeah,
a
he is
specific
conflicted, but like he's not saying that like he's a friend or anything. He's more like
he's saying that the Guts is the one person who makes him lose his composure and is the one person that makes him forget his dream. So it says that he feels regret. You see,
he's not expressing regret.
The reason that Griffith goes to Charlotte was it was a way for him to continue the path to his dream, but quickly and desperately to convince himself that that he doesn't need Guts. But as he's having sex with Charlotte, Guts keeps playing in his mind and he's trying to distract himself.
And then the first reaction that Griffith has is just choking, trying to choke Guts, but he doesn't have the means to.
The point is that Griffith did not acknowledge that Guts was a true friend in the second duel. It was only afterwards he realized his mistake. He realized that he was lying to him in the second duel.
Okay, so you're saying for whatever reason, only till after the second duel he realizes he's a friend.
Yes.
Okay.
Because like he sees the situation.
The second duel is when his sword breaks into.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that's the reality of he is my friend, because that's based on his criteria of what a friend is. That's totally fine. Even if he was thinking he was before, it doesn't really matter. That's the reality of what he defined, right? Right.
Okay. He didn't internally realize that until his epiphany just before he did the sacrifice. He didn't realize that internally.
Wait a second. So why does that matter though?
Because we're talking about how Griffith we're talking about whether Griffith is lying in certain scenes, and that requires an understanding of.
So you admit he's not a friend till the Eclipse?
He's a friend. He just doesn't realize it. He doesn't admit it to himself.
Okay, that's fair, I guess.
Yeah, it all makes sense.
Well, I just don't think what he's thinking is really relevant to why the narrative is the way it is. And
it is because in order to understand whether a character is lying, we need true internal motivation. And my premise that he feels empathy is predicated on the fact that he lies in certain scenes. So of course, internal motivation matters.
Okay, but
because that's what we're talking.
We can just characterize this as an usurper of a power-hungry fellow who's gone through a lot of people. And some of those people he regards as more valuable than others. He cares about them more in some capacity. I don't care what emotion that is. Call it empathy, call it camaraderie. It doesn't really matter. And in certain cases, he shows those emotions in negative ways. And he doesn't know how to deal with that. That is what we would call, in certain instances, not every example, of course, of Griffith is negative, but the narcissistic behavior of not getting what you want. It's called narcissistic rage, I think. I think that's I don't know if that's the medical term. I know it sounds a little silly, but it's when the narcissist does not get what they want, and they try to compensate and they try to behave a certain way. I'm not saying this is the example, but it's a way of categorizing his behavior. And once you wrap it around that, it's like, this makes everything that Griffith has done within that label. It goes, okay, this makes more sense. Why he is the way he is, and why people like him, and how he's so good with people. And I think if you want to play into the whole concept of the murderous fantasy world that they're in, where everyone's a certain shade of black, then it's sort of like, okay, Griffith knows how to ride that hierarchy, so he knows how to get up there.
Okay, I've actually written quite a lengthy couple of paragraphs exploring whether or not Griffith is a narcissist. So I'd like to be able to read it all out.
Well.
Respond after.
How long is it?
Is that all right?
How long is it?
It's like three paragraphs. It's not that long.
All right, that's fair.
Let me talk.
Go for it.
All right. So in the first 10 minutes of your video, you said that Griffith is less moral than Guts due to his narcissism. Use that as evidence that he's less moral. So I looked up what are the common traits of a narcissist, and the first one is a grandiose sense of importance, and it's delusional. Would you agree with that?
He has a grandiose sense of importance, yes.
Is it diluted? It has to be diluted.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does, because if it's not diluted, then he's just understands reality.
A grandiose sense of self-importance is, I think,
Well,
amazing.
If a person is genuinely important in a certain context, and but this is what I've said, that he does kind of have a grandiose sense of importance, but it's not inherent to his character. It's not an innate biological personality disorder, and it's not delusional. He was important.
And we're talking about NPD. It is a specific thing. That,
yeah, sure, or just narcissism in general, whether it's inherent to his character or whether he just comes off narcissism.
Okay,
because,
that's fair.
He projects this persona.
That's fair, sure.
This false persona, yeah. So he was important. Thousands of people's lives and dreams rested on his shoulders. He knew that responsibility. He was also treated as a messiah figure for his entire teenage life. He didn't manipulate or groom people into worshiping him at 3 years old. That's how they always regarded him. They gave him importance. It wasn't self-assigned. Griffith simply understands exactly how important he truly is to his men, going by how they treated him. And he didn't like that, by the way. He found the burden to be incredibly heavy. And the main reason he was so fond of Guts was because he was an escape from all that. Guts always treated Griffith like an equal. And so Griffith felt like Guts was the only person he could be himself around. Certainly not with Judo, Casca, or Corcus, who all looked up to him and had an inferiority complex of some form towards him. It made Griffith lonely. He also didn't feel self-importance at the expense of others. He valued Guts as a soldier and a friend to such an extent that he put his life on the line on multiple occasions.
Okay, so you're saying he does have a sense of self-importance.
But it's completely valid and accurate. It's not overblown.
It's the same thing.
It's exactly how it... you're not a narcissist for understanding your importance if you're president of the United States. You know what I mean? You are important.
Actually,
you understand
people who are in those positions are very egotistical. So whether it's grandiose, whether it's imagined, the persona is pretty much the same. You know, it's going to happen.
Yeah, his persona, but not his true internal self.
That doesn't matter. We're talking about the character.
It does matter because we're talking about internal motivations.
I don't care about your weird definition of internal sense of self. I don't even know what that means. We're talking about the character of Griffith. Okay?
Right.
Good.
Right. We have his external actions. He did bad things. We've gone over that. But in the first 10 minutes of your video, you used his narcissism as a reason why Griffith is bad and unlikable. That's an internal thing, right? It's not just action. It's how he perceives himself and the world around him.
When you're talking about doing actions, people will see that as good or bad. And everyone is bad in Berserk. The difference is, I guess, Griffith is just very more efficient at being bad.
Right. I'll just go over another aspect of narcissism. Another aspect is a sense of entitlement. And this is kind of true in the sense that he believed he was fated to be successful. But an important part of this is expecting to get whatever they want when they want it. Griffith doesn't feel entitled to use his men's lives and deaths to achieve his dream. He doesn't believe that he can do that while staying unclean. He believes that he has a duty to his men to look after them and see their dreams through to fruition. And he goes so far as to whore himself out to save their lives. Another important aspect is that narcissists exploit others without guilt or shame. This is absolutely not true. I referred to my previous argument.
Just before that, because that seems like a long one.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. In the manga, he clearly says it's for the budget, because if he keeps losing his man, he was really young at that time, wasn't he? He was 13 or 14 when the lake scene happened. Okay, so if you lose manpower that fast and you can't provide equipment for your man, then you just fucked. So he saw the rape not rape, but the sex with Ganon as an opportunity to get money without sacrificing his man that early, so he can continue his war efforts.
Yeah, but that was specifically after he felt such overwhelming guilt toward the dead child soldier. Mira wouldn't have included that scene if it was merely due to money.
It's not just the emotions, but the strategic aspects of just going and burning through all your man.
But that strategy was built on the foundation of his men. He says, well, I need money so that less men die on the battlefield because I don't want them to die needlessly. I care about their dreams. I care about that boy soldier. That's his underlying foundational motivation.
Well, he says he doesn't care about
Does
them.
that make sense? Well, that's the moment where that persona.
Well, he thinks he cares about them
momentarily
with his
slips.
fucked up sense of justice.
Well, no, he thinks the opposite most of the time, as we've gone over about 50 different times already. But anyway, he does not exploit others without guilt or shame. And here's another interesting, important point. He wouldn't order Guts to assassinate Julius for him. He specifically requested for Guts to do that, which Guts was surprised by. He was like, why didn't you just order me to assassinate Julius? That's pretty weird. It's because Griffith cares about Guts' consent, because he doesn't view Guts as a mere... He even consoled in Guts when he felt guilty over the hired thugs he killed in the aftermath of the Queen's death, and he asked whether Guts thought he was cruel. Guts responded by saying it was fine to kill anyone because that's the path to Queen. Griffith is filled with more guilt and remorse towards the people he killed than anyone else in the Hawks. Especially Guts.
Why are you
Guts
assuming
feels
it's guilt?
no remorse.
Why are you assuming that's guilt? Because he did the same speech with Casca. Why do you think I'm dirty, or why do you think you're doing this dirty business? I'm sorry about that. Like, why do you call that guilt?
Because it's contextualized by the lake scene with Casca.
No. I mean the scene with Griffith after he kills the abductors of what's his name's daughter.
Because we know from the lake scene that when when people die for him, in general, when people die for him, he feels bad about that. There's a real emotion he feels. Because earlier on we had this discussion.
That's not an emotion per se. He just says, I involved you in this filthy scheme, and I didn't even get my hands dirty.
He says, do you think I'm cruel? He has a really sad expression. Then Guts says it's okay, and Griffith looks relieved. He's like, okay. So it's clearly an emotional
his facial
thing.
expression is emotional because he can move his lips or his eyes.
Do you want me to send you the
I'm looking at it right now.
You're looking at the image of
I involved
Guts,
you in this filthy
Griffith
scheme,
acting,
and I didn't even get my hands dirty. Do you think that I'm cruel?
and you're looking at his
And you're saying
facial
because he's
expression.
looking at with the pursed lips, and I guess his eyes are slightly, well, I don't know
Okay,
how to describe his
and
eyes.
look at Guts' response, and then look at how Griffith lowers his head and smiles,
And
then they walk off into the distance. Well, because Guts reassures Griffith, and then he smiles when he wasn't before. It's an emotional thing. People express themselves. People have facial expressions when they feel things. What is this argument? I don't understand.
Guts
This
does
is so
because
weird.
Griffith is a narcissist. He can make shit up. He doesn't have to have this conversation.
But that's not based on anything. You're not
Yes, it
basing that on
is.
anything.
He is
How do you know
killing
he's a narcissist?
everyone for his goals.
But again, we know that he
I don't care what he
I
says.
just went through an aspect of narcissism was that he exploits other
Yes,
people
and you're
without
trying to
guilt
stretch
or shame.
it to mean
Without
he's
guilt
something
or
else.
shame.
There is
We
9
know that he
different
feels
terms
guilt
for
or shame,
narcissism.
which means that
You need 5 of the
doesn't-
9, and you're cherry picking whatever you want. Go through all 9 next time, and don't try to favor one or the other. Do not try to infer an emotional state or try to guess, oh, he's sad because his face looks like this way because I involved you in this filthy scheme. And I didn't even
I
get my
just
hands
gave you the context of other scenes to inform this analysis.
You
You're
are
going off
describing
nothing. You're
it
going
on-
off
no,
what ifs.
You're describing.
You don't.
I'm going off
You don't
what
even
ifs.
remember.
I'm
You
looking
don't
at the
even
scene right
remember.
now. I'm reading the scene
You
right
don't-
now.
You don't even remember half of the chapters of what the fuck happens in the story. You're not
I
prepared
don't
for
need
this.
to know.
You have to
excuse
have
me,
you have to
sir,
have it explained to the
excuse
other
me,
guy.
I'm reading this comic manga right now. Number
Well,
32.
the audience can. Is it on the screen on the live stream?
Would you like me to put it on the screen?
Well, Well, you can put it on the screen, and the audience can decide for themselves.
Okay, I can give
Because
you a
I'm
link.
sure that they'll agree with me.
Okay. There it is. That's a link in the description. Let me see if I can get my video. Okay, I'm just waiting for the page to load.
Listen, we know that he feels guilty towards people when they die and it's his fault. So why is it ridiculous for me to then apply that to another scene where he again says that he feels guilty?
Basing this
and he
off
has
Because
that
you're
words.
completely basing all of this on
I'm
this
basing
one
it off other
headcanon.
scenes. You're basing it off nothing.
Excuse me, what do you mean I'm
You're basing
basing
it
off
off
nothing?
nothing.
What am I basing it what off?
Well, you're just being contrarian to everything I say. I say that this is the reason why he does something, and you say, how do you know that? What if it's this? You just give the opposite without actually ever bringing any
assuming a
alternative
mental state
evidence
or
to
an
the table.
emotional state based off a facial expression by a master manipulator who wants all of
because
his men to die for him.
No, I'm pretty sure I just referenced the lake scene. I didn't just appeal to his facial expression. I talked about the lake scene with Casca,
where
he's been shown to
manipulating his behavior for Casca.
But I just went through why he wasn't, and you had no answer to that.
I said he's a narcissist. He's self-inflicting himself based off who knows what. I don't know what's going through his mind. It doesn't matter.
So you said he was lying about guilt to manipulate Casca. But then we just went through the whole thing about, for the entire arc, he was telling everyone the exact opposite. So when he
So it's okay when he lies for your explanation, but it's not okay when he lies for my explanation. Is that how that goes?
Well, I've given explanations. You haven't. That's the bottom
I'm not
line.
assuming an extra step here. I'm not assuming he has some certain mental state or emotion, or he's got all these, I don't know, feelings for people. We have no idea who they are, what their dreams are, and that has caused him to dig into his triceps and biceps so violently, because that's what normal people do when they have so much positive emotion flowing through their body.
I'm not taking any extra step. When Griffith says, I feel awful about the men that died for me, and then I take that at face value, that's me just reading the words on the page.
Yeah.
You have to then bring the evidence to the table to suggest that what he's saying right there isn't the truth. You haven't done that. You can't do that because you're wrong.
How am I wrong?
For all the reasons I've been outlining for the past however long the stream's been going on.
When he says in that conversation, no, I don't. I came to this conclusion rationally, which brings less risk, losing hundreds of soldiers in 10 battles or snaring a rich old man. How is that wrong?
What does he say in the very next couple of pages? How does he contradict that? He says, but I feel all this horrible guilt towards the men that died for me. The reason that
if there is something that I can do for them, something I can do for the dead, then it is to win. I must keep winning to attain my dream, the same one they clung to and risked their lives for. Oh no, he's justifying what he's always wanted by saying, hey, all those guys died for a reason. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, get all my men killed for my dream.
No, because the whole point of that scene is that he's seeking to minimize their deaths by throwing himself out again so that he doesn't have to fight so many battles.
No, he's just rationalizing it for himself with his fucked up logic.
He can't be rationalizing it to continue because
yes, he can.
His actions. No, but he
absolutely
hasn't done
does.
that. He hasn't done that because the whole point is he whored himself out to minimize their deaths by minimizing the number of battles he fights. He's not willing to needlessly kill his soldiers. He doesn't feel entitled to their lives. That's the point.
Can this play into him being another strategy move of like saving?
How much longer is this going to go on for? Because I feel like we're at an impasse, kind of.
Well, the thing is that when you read characters in a certain way, you do not assume that they've got this emotional state or this mental state or whatever's inside. We can't really know for sure unless the story actively tells us, where in one example with the gods come down and go, ba-boom, this is your mental state, right? That's a good, I mean, that's not the best way of doing it in a story, but that's all we got. When we can see into the mind, or we have like, I don't know, like a telepath, like in fantasy or science fiction, of what's actually going on.
You have that. Right. We have that. We have the idea of evil telling Griffith what his internal emotional state is, and we have Griffith himself in an internal monologue at the end saying he did truly care about Guts, so all the times he said that he didn't, that wasn't actually true. That's how we know. An internal monologue, that's not up for interpretation. That's what he
I would agree he cares
thought.
about Guts, but not I mean,
In what way he cares about Guts?
yeah,
That's
I'm
the
not.
question.
I'm not saying he doesn't
Well,
care about his men.
we've already been through the fact that he viewed Guts beyond his use to him as a mere tool. That's the whole point. He made him
There's
forget.
no indication that he felt gay love for Guts.
He didn't say that.
You said that in the video.
No, that was
Yes,
another
you
meme.
said that in the video.
No, I know I said that, but it was a funny meme take. I was intentionally being provocative. I was actually going to go through your dislike of my use of toxic masculinity in the video,
Well,
and I was going to go over
you know what?
a lot of.
Once we get to a
lot
certain
of
point, there's a lot of stuff I just sort of gloss over. Like, this is not worth even discussing. This is silly.
Yeah, but I was actually going to go. I was going to say that in stories that explore more traditional modes of masculinity, you often get characters who are able to express their emotions openly to each other, and in this modern toxic masculinity that we have ourselves in urban industrialized societies,
Okay.
when we read these stories, a lot of people assume that these male characters who care about each other and who have intimate relationships are gay, like Griffith and Guts, like Sam and Frodo from Lord of. They assume that these people are gay because they're open to each other emotionally, but they're not. They're just really good friends in a non-toxic way, in a non-toxic masculine way. So that was an interesting thing I was going to go over, because the term toxic masculinity wasn't actually coined by feminists. It was coined by the mythopoetic men's movement, which is like a self-help organization for men from the 80s. And they didn't like feminism. They actually used Jungian archetypes and Jungian texts to create this archetypal idea of deep masculinity from tribal societies. They said that the modern type of masculinity, emotional repression, self-reliance, and competitiveness, isn't actually the original masculinity. It's a result of individualist modern capitalism, and that's and all
Right.
that.
I mean, yeah, the etymology of that begins in the 80s, but it's used differently nowadays, and it's not worth
But
getting
the point
into.
wasn't, in the original video you said, how can Berserk be about toxic masculinity? That didn't exist in the 80s, and it was on SJW campuses. I'm saying that toxic masculinity absolutely applies to the Jungian themes of Berserk, because that's where the term originated. And it doesn't have to be exploring feminist messaging, because a lot of people who believe in the older archetypal ideas surrounding masculinity, they also reject the more modern toxic masculinity. So it doesn't even have to be feminist for Berserk to be exploring these ideas of emotional men.
Yeah, but we're talking in a very specific way, and it's not really inducive of understanding the narrative. This is like using a lens on one scene or two scenes to analyze a relationship or something that, I don't know, maybe a sociology course might look at. It's not really helpful.
I've talked about a lot of scenes that involving Griffith repressing his emotionality. I mean, that's the main parallel between Guts and Griffith's story. Griffith Guts overcomes that, and
you're just describing a personality
that's the
and
power of friendship.
Yeah, but I know we're just discussing a personality that has a certain attitude. I mean, it doesn't really change much, whatever lens you've got.
Yeah, but the lens that the people who coined the term toxic masculinity, the lens they were looking at it through was Jungian psychology, and that is a lot of what Berserk is about.
But that's
so it's
again
valid to view it through that lens, because that's all of Berserk.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
I could use I could use a socio-political lens. I could use a feminist lens. I could use a capitalist lens. It's not really part of the narrative. It's not helping me understand the narrative. It's just I can hyper focus on this one thing with this lens.
But I thought you knew all about how Berserk talks about the shadow and all of that, and how that's essential.
You can look
that's
at
a thing that you view it through a Jungian lens sometimes.
I don't need to use that to
funny.
understand the concept of Berserk. If I were to look at Berserk as a narrative that is that requires a certain lens or something like that, I would look at the concept of fate as a theme, as good versus evil, or evil over or lesser evils or greater evils. Like there's some themes you could work with. I don't think toxic masculinity is a very effective one, even if it is Jungian. That's sort of neither here nor there.
Okay. Forget the term toxic masculinity. Just think emotional repression. We've just had an hours-long conversation about how Berserk explores emotional repression. That should be enough, don't you think?
No, it's not useful. If we look at a personality in a story or whatever, and you're saying, well, they're not expressing themselves, it's like, great. Do we need to know all the thoughts that Batman is having to enjoy the film? Like, what is really going through Bruce's mind? Like, I don't need to know that. It's not useful to the scene. It's not useful to the plot. It's not useful to characterizing the problems of the story.
It is when Griffith's emotional repression is a driving force behind a lot of his actions. Why he freaks out when Guts leaves. How he responds to the death of children that die for him.
Yeah, but you're making
the
that
reason
assumption.
why he sacrificed his soldiers into the Eclipse.
You're
Well,
still
I've made
making
my
it-
arguments.
I know,
now.
but you're
nothing else.
still focusing on the internal where there is no clear evidence. You're just trying to say, okay, well, he says this, therefore that. And there's another scene where he says nothing else, where it could mean something different. Like,
I don't
whether he
understand what
cared-
you want. You want the author to come out and say Griffith is about emotional repression. He did that. Does it need to be explicitly stated in the narrative?
If that's
what a lot of
when you are using
stories-
terms like that, when you are using like psych terms or sociological terms, then you're in your own world. You're not in the world of the narrative. You're trying to pull that world into the narrative and cover it.
This is another thing. Yeah, this is another thing that I wanted to cover. The fact that toxic masculinity wasn't a term in the age can't be applied to Berserk. But here's the thing. Just because I used that term, just because the term didn't exist, doesn't mean that the general idea of emotional repression was completely foreign to Japan in the 1980s. Of course, people in Japan knew that men sometimes unhealthily, and that's a thing that can be explored. Me using the term toxic masculinity, it's a semantic argument. Pretend I didn't say that. Pretend I just said
it's kind of
commentary on.
it's kind of pointless because you're going to use another word to explain the internal world that we have no access to.
We do have access to.
You're
He has
making
internal monologues.
the
It's what
assumption.
gods talk about. It's not an assumption. It's evidence based.
When you have a God moment like the illusion, which is not the best form of God moments because it is effectively an illusion. It's not crystal clear. Yes, you could make that argument like, okay, this is what's actually in his mind. This is what the telepath is saying. We can read his brain with this computer, blah, blah, blah. That's great. I'm not denying that. It's still interpretive because it is still a dream illusion thing. But we have to take what the gods say as fact because they're the gods. Now, the argument is, well, they can be manipulated. I mean, we know they're manipulating Griffith. So what is true and what is false? That's the problem. It still comes down to we still don't know exactly what the problem is. So,
Okay. I am sure that in certain stories where it isn't explicitly stated what a character's internal psychology is, I'm sure you still have beliefs about what that character feels internally, even if it's not explicitly stated. Even if there's no 100% truth, you still believe that. And I believe that you can still be swayed by different pieces of evidence, even if there's no 100% truth. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but
I can guarantee you that just because there's no 100% truth that Batman thinks this internal thing, I'm sure that you don't use that as a reason to not believe that in certain instances.
I can believe
You have
many-
your own inference.
Yeah, I know. I just
Well,
think
we're
it's not
talking about
effective.
belief here. No one can prove it, but I've given the most substantive evidence in this conversation. You've what if?
Sorry, what have I claimed?
You haven't. Well, you've claimed the opposite of everything I'm saying by appealing to the fact that I can't know, rather than actually undermining or trying to contradict what my actual argument.
Well, we tend to
Actual
look at the
textual.
actions of a character to determine their character, what they actually want, what they do for it. Everyone knows
I've
Griffith's.
done that.
Yes, everyone knows Griffith's goal. It's constantly repeated, and you're trying to justify it as well. In for a penny. Let's just keep going, and it doesn't matter in what context, or if it does. Oh, he was being tricked. When we all know it's the same character. whether he's
Really?
emaciated, whether he's young, whether he's a godlike demi creature or whatever. Like, it's the same character. You could argue
It's the same
parts of it
character,
are turned
but
off and on.
is it-
He's less of this or more of that. He's been depersonalized or whatever, but it's the same character, right? So,
But I've already explained why I distinguish Femto from human Griffith. It's important to understand these changes in his psychology throughout the story to ensure that you don't fall into the mistake of using the actions of Femto to inform your analysis of human Griffith.
we haven't even,
entire
at least I have not even talked
Well-
about Femto or what happens after that.
I do want to talk about that then, because I was in the middle of explaining Femto and
Well, you
I
were
kinda
talking
we
about narcissism, and I was like, okay, this is enough. We don't need to.
this was ages ago. I wanted to prove that Griffith did not lose his Griffith losing his compassion in the Eclipse is not headcanon. It's canon, 100% canon. So
Sorry, is this a reference to the sword cemetery where he sees guts and he says, "I don't feel anything. I'm just."
no, it's a reference to the god. I'll read it out for you. So in my document, I said, I know that you don't be moral, but in Griffith's specific case, empathy was the deciding factor in his moral action. Griffith hesitated in strangling guts because of his empathy. It overrode his
Wait, stop.
spiteful feelings toward.
What does that
We
mean?
can go over that after.
Yeah, but what does that mean?
Well, when Griffith first sees Guts, when Guts first saves him from the dungeon, the first thing Griffith does is he goes for Guts' throat and tries to strangle him. Then Guts starts crying, and he literally cries on face. Then there's a thought bubble of Griffith reacting to that. Then there are multiple panels of him slowly, intentionally down his hand, caress Guts' arm and hand after seeing Guts in tears. He's comforting him. This indicates that his love for Guts allowed him to stop himself from strangling him.
Or think about this: he's so weak, his first attempt to do a thing is not going to be effective.
Okay, I would accept that as a possible interpretation, if not for the added context of later scenes in general mind space. For example, he shows clear concern for Guts' well-being in the fight with Wild and tries to reach for a sword to help him out, and he tries to save Guts from falling during the eclipse. He doesn't want any harm to befall Guts. He cannot hurt Guts out of spite in this state of mind. But something is clearly different after the transformation. He still possesses those spiteful feelings towards Guts. That's why he raped Casca. But he didn't possess the empathy to overcome that this time. In chapter 82, which is completely canon, by the way, a lot of people will say that I can't mention the idea of evil. Chapter 83 isn't canon.
It is canon. It's just like Miria said that it was too early at the time.
Yeah. Griffith is surprised that he is no longer feeling anything towards his men, like he had previously been feeling throughout the entire sequence. He says, "All their deaths are piercing through me. How strange I can't feel anything." You could argue that this was him just not caring, but that would be awful character development for Griffith to just complete 180 just like that.
Wait.
But
So
also-
you're blaming the writer?
No, I'm still going through it. But also, the proof that this is a magical transformation, the idea of evil responds to this by explaining that Griffith will never cry again, that he has frozen Griffith's heart, and that Griffith's compassion has died. There's nothing ambiguous about that. That's what he tells him. This is further proven by the Slug Count's initial audience with the God Hand, the first one, when he sacrifices his wife. After finding out about his heretic wife, he tries to kill himself to end his suffering and quote-unquote escape his despair. Then the God Hand appear and tell him that in exchange for sacrificing his wife, he would be quote-unquote turned into a supernatural being that would never feel sorrow or despair. He's told that his fragile human heart will be buried in a similar line to the idea of evil Griffiths wrote. They say that sacrificing your loved ones will open a fissure in your heart, allowing evil to surge. This is the canonical transformation. It inhibits empathy and compassion. That's the reason the Count summoned them in the first place, because he no longer such empathetic despair towards his wife. That's the reason he summoned the God Hand in the first place, and they explained to him that time that if you go through with this, the transformation will take away this compassion, and you will become an apathetic or wholly evil apostle. So it's not headcanon. It's supported in every single transformation ceremony that we see in the manga. So, did you disagree with any of that? Does any of that sound like headcanon?
Are we talking about Griffith?
We're talking about a loss. We're talking about the effect of what the transformation has on people that say yes to the sacrifice. As proven by what the God Hand say to the Count and what the idea of evil says to Griffith, the effect of the transformation is a loss of human compassion, so that you can no longer feel any sort of positive love towards the people that you previously cared about. That's the reason that the Slug Count initially accepted the God Hand's offer. He didn't want to feel things anymore. So that's the effect of the transformation. So that proves that my separation of Griffith and Femto as separate entities in terms of a loss of empathy isn't headcanon, it's canonical fact. And people miss it all the time.
Yeah, I probably don't.
And that's probably my...
Yeah, I don't recall that chapter. I'd have to check it out.
Well, I don't know why in my it's the start of volume 3, I believe. Unless not. For some reason, this Read Berserk Manga Online website, Berserk Chapter 1 starts like 6 volumes into the manga. It's like Berserk Chapter G. But yeah. It's like Chapter 7 or something. Yeah, Chapter 7. If you scroll down, in fact, I'll read it out loud to you. Where is it? Here, I've almost got it. That's right. You couldn't do it. You couldn't cut away half of yourself. And seeing the triumphant, knowing smile of your betrayer, your wife, drove you to the depths of despair. You decided to end your own life to escape that despair. However, your despair itself was part of the wheel of fate. The wailing of your soul, which could never be eased by the gods of this world, opened up a portal to another dimension. And you said, "Are you gods or messengers from hell? It makes no difference. Whatever you are, save me from my suffering. If you do, I'll give you anything." And we promised you that we would make you into a supernatural being who would never know sorrow or despair for a single phrase in exchange for sacrificing. Indeed, you said it. I offer this woman for sacrifice. A life you couldn't take by your own hand, the life of the person you loved the most and hated, gave it to us, so that you could bury your fragile human heart, so that you could transcend your very humanity. And I'm going to stop going on now, but I think I've proven my point.
All right, so where are we in... Well, let me just see the video. We haven't moved the video in an hour or so.
Well, we have been going on for almost like 3 hours.
I might actually have to leave soon because my girlfriend wants to sleep, I think.
Oh, yeah, we are actually going on 3 hours. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. I didn't get the last part of the 10 minutes, but thank you for reciting your notes. That was helpful. I'll be sure.
Did that change your mind about anything at all?
Well, you cherry-picked narcissism, which is not helpful. You assume
also, there's one more thing that I really need to go over really quickly.
No, we gotta go. Anyway,
it'll be really quick, literally just a sentence.
Okay, go for it.
You said that someone got really angry in the last
there's lots of
video
people that get angry that they just
probably bears.
Yeah, that's normal for him. Don't worry about him.
That Guts didn't actually try to rape Casca, and he was possessed by a demon at the time. I just want to clear it up. Guts wasn't actually possessed by a demon in that scene. That was the previous scene where Guts is defending Casca from demons, and then a demon goes into him and he strangles Casca. That was the possession. The later scene when he tries to rape her, he simply sees her with her breasts out, having been ripped because some soldiers tried to rape her, and then he goes at her. The abusive darkness only shows up a little bit after he already started trying to forcefully kiss her. So I just wanted to disprove that common misconception that Gus didn't try to rape Cassidy. He 100% did. Sorry, I've been going on for too long. Let you leave.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know that wasn't the easiest conversation you might have had on the topic. I don't know if this is a thing you keep doing, but enjoy your love of manga and anime, and keep making videos and analysis. It's always nice to hear a differing opinion, even if we disagree. So, thank you so much for coming on. That was good of you.
You too, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we'd happy to have you in the Discord, and you could argue to your heart's content to, maybe the nicer people in there, because they have their own opinions on media as well. So maybe you might change a few minds. I don't know. I'm going to go keep reading the rest of that arc, because I clearly didn't know as much as I should. So that would be good. And it's an awesome manga. Everyone should check it out. It's one of the greats. It's one of those, it has that 90s appeal, but still modern. It's beautiful artwork, whether you get the story in depth or just appreciate the good versus evil vibe. Or I think it's almost a theme of just striving against all odds. It's so impossible sometimes, these stories. The environments, the characters, the villains, they seem larger than life. And there's too many characters for me to follow. And I sort of got tired of reading it just because it's so big and a lot to remember. But if you like epics, if you like, was it the 400th episode? No, it must be 300 still. The manga is still going on, so it just takes a very long time to come out.
At 374, I believe.
Wow, that's amazing. So, anyway, do check out Berserk. It is an awesome anime manga. And thank you for your time, guys. It is sweltering. Holy crap, I ran out of water a long time ago. But thank you so much for tuning in, and have yourself a great evening. We'll talk to you soon. Keep your suggestions coming in the Discord. That'd be helpful, so we know what we're doing tomorrow or the day after. Actually, I think tomorrow's a day off. But Friday, we might have another video coming up. So, thank you so much. Have a great evening.